There's this psychiatrist, a lady named Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She has a theory about the black man in America. She says that because of the system of racism, the black man in this country has been made to think of himself as a baby, a not yet fully formed being who has not realized his full potential. To support her claim, she offers the following. First off, what does a black man call his woman? Mama. Secondly, what does a black man call his closest acquaintances? His boys. And finally, what does a black man call his place of residence? The crib.
How many black women have called a black man baby in their time? Tell the truth and shame the devil. How many black men have called the woman they sleep with mama? Hey mama, can I ride with you? How many men have called the place where they sleep a crib? Ooh. In the white supremacy system and culture. And the brain computer prints out, man who calls another man the man, calls the woman he sleeps with mama, calls himself baby, calls the place where he sleeps a crib. A baby compared to a man is what? Powerless. But because we were not taught to understand nor to be truthful about the reality of white supremacy, when black men greet each other, they say, hey, what's happening? Everything's cool. But Satchmo said, Louis Armstrong said, somebody asked him, hey, what's happening, Pops? And he said, the white man is still in charge.
Bismillah. Wassalatu wassalamu rasulullah wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon his last and final messenger as to as follows. Families, friends, foes, haters, and hatettes, welcome back to the Feachaz. I greet you all in peace and love with no hatred in my heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you. And before we begin, I would ask you to like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Patreon. As you know, we got a lot of haters up in here. I want the brothers and sisters who are already in to please share this episode, because this is an incredibly important topic for the community. And this is something that, of course, it's a long time coming to be addressed, particularly in the Muslim community. But not just the Muslim community, the Black community at large. And it's very important that you guys share. And it's very important for the brothers to participate, because we have to essentially address this and nip this problem and come up with solutions to the problem, actual solutions. You know, so I want to thank the brother Walid. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, may Allah reward you for your generosity and make it heavy on your scales and multiply it for you for 1,000-fold and cause it to be a means of forgiveness for you and raise your levels by it, as well as Sister Tika as well, the same thing. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah reward you for it. May Allah make it heavy for you on your scales and multiply it for you 1,000-fold. And we want everybody to say Ameen for our dua. Now, the clip in the beginning was from a psychologist. Her name is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And I remember when she was starting to make headway back in the late 80s and early 90s or whatnot. And everybody kind of laughed at her ideas, during those times. Right. But nobody's laughing now. As a matter of fact, since she's passed, everybody's kind of taken her work very seriously. And what she talks about how racism is in fact white supremacy. And she says that essentially white people are kind of motivated by racism in itself, in order to keep themselves in positions of power. So psychologically, it's kind of like their motivation. However, the adverse effects of that are obviously is the effects on the Black community at large, and how racism, as when she says racism, she always says racism, white supremacy. She doesn't want anybody to mix up racism with the general idea of racism as some sort of innate feeling of other races. You know what I mean? Like you just don't like somebody because of the color of their skin. She equates racism with the overt oppression of one people over another. That's how she describes racism. Essentially, most Black intellectuals, they describe it in that way, anyways, right? Because racism wasn't a thing until the 15th century, anyways. There wasn't a thing called racism until it appeared in Spain with the pure blood laws. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Islam in perspective. Wa alaikum salam, Abdul Mateen as well. Malaysia, bro, I didn't see you. Okay. So, anyways, however, she goes into detail about the psychological effects that racism has had on Black people. And one of the things that she mentions is the baby boy syndrome, and how Black people, or Black men rather, because of the white supremacist imposition on Black society, have been stuck in a type of forever adolescent loop where they can't get out of boyhood. And if you look in the Black community, for example, you'll find many men well into adulthood still wearing the same type of styles that teenagers wear and whatnot. And as she mentioned, it's very common in Black culture for Black women to call their men baby, and the other way around, and mama, and these type of things. However, when they refer to the oppressor, they refer to them as the man. You know what I mean? So what she theorizes is that this system has now caused Black men to essentially lose confidence in themselves and always be perpetually in a state of adolescence and boyhood. Not only that, but there are many factors to this, and we touched on a few of those factors in terms of single parenthood, in terms of lack of education, in terms of lack of opportunities and whatnot. And all of these things that we face, at the end of the day, these are problems that we have to overcome. And we can't be asking other people, as particularly our enemy, particularly them, to come and help solve our issues for us. So now we have these issues with the breaking up of the Black family, where women are essentially choosing to have families instead of marriage, where women are chasing their men out of the homes, and where the men have chosen the wrong types of women in order to get quick sexual gratification, and so on and so on. You know, the baby mama culture, where it's prevalent in the Black community, the not thinking about consequences of sex outside of marriage. And when you have generations of this type of behavior, what you're going to get is what you actually see. And on top of that, what exasperates that is that all of our media, well, not our media, but the media of the enemy, okay, the media of the enemy, in which they put they put happy Negroes in front of cameras to normalize backwards and despotic, debaucherous behavior. So we have shows like, you know, Housewives of Atlanta and Love and Hip Hop and all this kind of stuff. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother Bilal Gajibo, right? I think that's how you pronounce the name. And brother Seema, walaikum salam. And walaikum salam Abu Omar. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So there are plenty of moving parts in the emasculation and the vortex of perpetually having Black men in a state of adolescence. Many moving parts. Black men, by and large, are lacking confidence in accomplishing tasks. I was talking to a doctor just this morning about this, actually. Black men are also not only lacking confidence because of what they see in media, what they're witnessing in schools and whatnot, but they are told in a very underhanded way that you can't be anything else except for an athlete or a comedian or an actor or a rapper, because these are the only images of success that are purported in the Black community. And what happened in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, with the Cosby Show and the spin-offs of series after that, there was a huge shift in the mindset of the people in that era, where they saw positive images of Black men, you know, solid nuclear families, where a husband and wife are in the house raising children. I mean, these types of images haven't been prevalent since, you know, Jews basically bought out Black media. Let's just call it what it is. You know what I mean? You haven't seen that. You know, if you look at BET, for example, that's not owned by Black Entertainment Television, not owned by Black people. I didn't know that the show Dear White People on Netflix, I didn't know that the producer or whatever that person was a white tranny person, right? I had no clue. But these are the people that are bringing your media to you. And Black people are the number one consumers of TV media. So what you are doing when you're consuming these images, you're actually investing in your own destruction, your own mind manipulation. Because the TV program, that when they say TV program, and it's not the program, you're the thing that is being programmed. The person on the other end of that screen is being programmed when that show is going on. And all these subliminal messages that is being sent to Black men in order to keep them in a certain type of mindset and behavioral quirk, right? Behavioral quirks, where their only aspirations in life is to be a basketball player or a rapper or whatnot, right? Then they don't look at being engineers or doctors or lawyers as success because they never see these images of success. But every other people group sees these images, and they aspire and work to acquire these types of images. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Abu Omar, كيفك?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. What you got for us, bro?
Yeah. Remember the other day we were talking like on WhatsApp, and I was mentioning to you because I'm a little bit younger. I'm with a lot of youth. The hip hop music we have today, right? Which like a lot of like the older generation will know about gangster rap, right? What we have today that the youth are listening to is like way like a whole other level of gangster rap. Like just this week, some of you might have heard there's a dude called Young Dolph who got killed in his hometown in Memphis, and that's the type of like legit the type of people today who get rap like get signed by the industry. Can you hear me all good?
Yeah.
Does that people get signed by the
industry?
industry?
You cut off there for a little bit, but I can hear you. Cut off a little bit there, but I can hear you, inshallah.
All right, alhamdulillah. The type of people getting signed by the industry now are literally people who are literal gang members. Like there was a dude last year called King Von, had a really big hype around him. He was on the OTF and Chicago scene. He got killed during election night, getting into a fight with some other rapper. This guy supposedly killed 7 people, and they gave him a record deal, and he was out here smoking on the dead. Like here's the thing: the rappers today, you'll find they will literally diss like people who've been murdered, like including teenagers and stuff, right? So diss people, and then like we talk about how people, we use words like nigger and bitch and stuff to disrespect other people. These rappers will literally call themselves stuff like demons, gorillas, savages. And this is very much part of that. It's like psychologically, what are they trying? Because if a white, let's be real. If some white person came out and said these people are savages and gorillas and demons, we would see that for being racist.
Yeah.
But when you got some black dude comes out and says, "Yeah, I'm a gorilla, I'm a demon, I'm a savage, I'm the realest killer," and he's on a beat, right? We're just like, "Oh yeah, that's the vibes, man. We're listening to that." And so like black kids will listen to this. So like white kids look at them and they say, "Oh yeah, so those black people, they really are. They themselves said it that they're demons, they're savages, they kill." And then our black kids who are absorbing these images, right? I mean, but you'll see the impact on this if you look at like say black people who are not from like the diaspora, like I was like say, look at like people who are Africans who are like Muslim, very like traditional background. Look at like Somalis, like a lot of Somalis, right? They're African, but they have very different heritage. But you see, the Somalis in the West, when they grow up in the West, they get fed this image that to be a black person, you got to be a savage, you got to be a demon, you got to be a real nigga, And so they start to take this on, even though. If within they have a more solid structure traditionally, they weren't disrupted in their culture the way those of us who were ripped out of the continent were, right?
Exactly.
But even for them, by being fed this mental image when they move to the West, they start to become programmed by this idea because that's the image that they see of blackness in this society. Like if I'm in this society, that's what it means to be black, right?
Exactly. So here's the killer. Black people absorb these images. They know innately that they're incorrect. They know there's something that's wrong in the matrix, but they can't pull themselves away from those images. You understand? They just kind of continue the emulation. And there's this perpetual state of complaining about black issues. When in reality, if you're not taking responsibility and accountability for your own self and what you consume, because your brain itself is like the stomach for your thoughts. So what you consume in terms of your so-called entertainment is feeding your brain. You feel me? That's what so if you consume, it's like if you consume a whole bunch of junk food, you're going to be unhealthy, correct? You're going to be like, you're going to get like a heart attack or something, like if that's all you consume, right? Well, what if you consume junk media? Yeah. You understand? And on top of that, we don't control our own media. Every single time we have, somebody else came and bought it and twisted it. Like in the 90s, we had Stop the Violence, right? We had, rappers who were basically talking against violent behavior. And now what we have is the total opposite. Well, who is behind the scenes that is funding these images for Black children? It's not us. It has to be the enemy. It has to be the enemy. And however, because of the the manipulation of minds, the mass manipulation of minds, we can't get out of that mindset. You know what I mean?
No, that's Assalamu Alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu Alaikum, brother Yasir.
Brother, I think you're muted. I think you're muted.
Naam, Jazakallah khair. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Brother Abu Omar.
We'll let Abu Omar finish his thought, and then we'll allow Sheikh Yassin to get his thought in as well. Go ahead, Abu.
Let Sheikh Yassin go.
Okay. I appreciate without playing Frances Cress Welsing. I used to love that woman back in the 70s, but I want to go back a little bit further and kind of talk a little bit about what our brother Abu Omar was mentioning about the names we call ourselves and each other. Back in the 60s, if someone called you Black, those were fighting words. You could get a serious fight out of someone if you called them Black. So we went from I'm not Black, I'm a Negro, to literally saying I'm not Black, I'm a nigger, right? To saying I'm Black, and took pride in Black. I was saying the other day, we started saying, hey, brother, sister, and we started. It was the back to Africa. People started recognizing their roots. And in fact, there was a big move toward finding out who you were, who your parents were, who their parents were, and going back to really take ownership of your legacy, of your ancestry, right? And then Frances Cress Welsing, one of the things she used to point out is the psychological, subliminal things that were going on. And that's what I was referring to the other day when I said the Black exploitation movies. And you were just mentioning about controlling our image. Who owns that? And we take it and adopt it as our own. And you talked about the rap music, as you both brought up. And in the 80s, there was Boogie Down Productions, and I wasn't into music back then, but I used to like KRS-One because he used to bring that positive message, right? And I dug that.
Public Enemy.
Exactly. So, and you said, as you said, they came in and took control. It was like, the Stop the Violence turned into this whole gangster, pushing the violence, making the violence, making it popular, making it trendy to be, I'll kill your mother and all of this, making those statements and calling each other names. So, and I want to say again, but I can't appreciate enough what you do to bring these out, because these are things that need to be discussed, and we need to work through these things and put a plan together. And how do we address this and bring other people involved? Because this is beautiful what you're doing. And I appreciate you, and I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you a big success in this, and a thorn in the side of those who are pushing the other narratives, whether they be from us or otherwise, right? So thank you very much for what you do.
One thing, I mean, I never actually revealed this, but I might as well do it now anyways. But one thing I'm in the habit of doing, and anybody who knows me knows I do this often, is I make dua against the enemy a lot. A lot. I make dua against them. And I ask Allah to eviscerate our enemies and to destroy our enemies and to humiliate our enemies and make us uh, be like the Beni Israel, that we can see they're drowning right in front of our eyes, like how you drowned Fir'aun
Yeah.
in front of the Beni Israel. I make dua against them a lot. These are wicked, evil people, and people really don't understand the level of their wickedness. And how can you understand if they're controlling all the images that you see about them? They are the angels, you're the devils. They're the educated brass, you're the criminals. They're the owners, you're the entertainers. You know what I mean? These are very, very, very evil people. Very evil. Like, you know what I mean? So when you were talking about hip hop, it basically started in the 70s, right? In the Bronx, New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what were the enemies saying at that time? You know what I'm saying? Oh, it's just a fad. Sorry, it's a passing fad. You know, it's not gonna pick up. Blah 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 blah. It's gonna go away, right? And then the 80s came. Hip hop didn't go away, and you found a new avenue of creative path for Black youth to make money through hip hop. And what were they saying? Because we weren't controlling the images, the enemy was controlling the images. This was the outlet for Black people to talk about what was going on in Black neighborhoods, and they were doing it. And it was picking up in the 80s, You mentioned about BDP. And what was the changing point for KRS-One was when Scott LaRock got killed. And when, because for those of you who don't know, Boogie Down Productions, back in the day, we're talking about KRS-One. He's a legendary hip hop artist. He has probably the longest reign of successful hip hop albums ever, right? So he started with Boogie Down Productions, and it was him and two other people in that group, as Scott LaRock and T LaRock, right? So that was Boogie Down Production, right? Right. So Scott LaRock got killed. You understand? And then he started pushing this positivity, like his music was very positive and whatnot. And then you started seeing Public Enemy in these times, and the whole hip hop scene was about upliftment of Black people. You know what I mean? All the way from the late 80s, all the way up until, I want to say, like the mid 90s or something. You know what I mean? It was just positive images. And even on TV, when we were controlling our images with the Cosby Show, Different World, In Living Color, you know, all these positive Black shows that were on TV. And what happened?
Now we got power.
The same enemy called hip hop a passing fad, saw the profitability in hip hop, and they took it over. In those days, it was Def Jam, Black owned. Def Jam, it was only Def Jam and Tommy Boy, Black owned. Both of them were Black owned hip hop labels. It was them, and that was it. You know what I mean? There were no other hip hop labels. You're right. And then these people, they saw the profitability of hip hop, and not only did they profiteer off of Black music, but they controlled the images. And that's when you started seeing gangster rap from the West Coast. You understand? That's when it started. There was no like gangster rap like that before Jews got into it.
You know what's crazy now? Like, you know how bad things have gotten with the image that they're pushing? I was talking to some of my friends who are still in the into the music, right? And they were telling me the biggest thing now, if you go on all the hip hop blogs and all of this, before this whole, the Young Dolph, and then before that you had that whole Travis Scott thing that happened, was you had this situation in the Bronx, the home of hip hop. You got these two cousins. You got two cousins, K Flock and D Thang. They're the two big new rappers from right now. They're cousins, and literally both of them are making songs dissing each other's dead homies, talking about wanting to kill each other. One of them live streamed himself sliding on the block of his cousin, and that's how much. And the industry's cool with all of this, right?
Yeah,
The industry's
they're
cool
fine with
with,
it.
with
And
two
then,
cousins literally trying to kill each other.
but this is one of the major reasons why we don't have mature black men. It's because the images that are forced down our throats, right? So we have to control the images that are coming in our community. Brother C.L. Edwards, Salaam Alaikum, bro. How you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. How's everybody doing?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. What you got for us, bro?
No, mashallah, I'm just listening. You know, at the point you just made, you can't get too mixed up and forget that black men and black women are have always been commodities in America. You know, if you do the history, you know, you talk about Wall Street. You know, before there was you know, what's going on Wall Street now with trading stocks, they were trading slaves, African slaves in New York. So you know, people usually associate slavery with the South, but there was slavery in the North also, you know. And with the entertainment industry, there was a documentary I watched a few months ago. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the origins of Hollywood and the entertainment industry. And you know, I don't want to get flagged, but you know, the ethnic group who founded the modern entertainment industry, that includes blackface, that includes minstrel shows. This is before talking pictures and radio. They just brought that over into talking pictures and into radio, and then that evolved into, you know, television and movies, and that evolved into, you know, this multi-billion dollars of music, online, social media, movies, radio still, and everything else. So it's the foundation is built on it is built on racism. It's built on, you know, mocking black people and finding and having and being that having that as being something entertaining.
Well, remember,
You know?
like, just to build on what you're saying, the first Hollywood blockbuster movie was Birth of a Nation. That was literally the first blockbuster movie they ever made, and it was about, and that movie revived the KKK. The KKK had died. The KKK had died off in the late 1890s. Because they were seen as representing too much of the elite and becoming corrupt. And then when this movie came out showing the great brave KKK destroying Reconstruction, these evil blacks taking over society, all played by white men in blackface, this gave the KKK its big impetus, and it blew up all over America until the 1930s, right? When the KKK again self-destructed when one of the leaders killed a white woman and they destroyed themselves.
Think about that. Why would that particular ethnic group finance a movie like that?
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Why do you like that whole entire mindset? But like you said, it did revive the KKK, and that shows you the power of movies and media. That shows you the power of movies. Like
and controlling image, you know, controlling image, and that's what they're very good at. They do it today. Social engineering is huge, and a lot of people are not aware of it. But as you say, pointing back to that movie, it showed the power. And then, if you all remember the what was it? A radio show. It was before a radio show called War of the Worlds. That sent America and really, you know, into panic, you know, into panic on a story that didn't exist. It was totally fictitious, and people were out with shotguns, and people were running scared, thinking that we were being invaded, and it was all a show. It's just a movie. It's just a radio show. You know, so the power of information to control people, their actions, and send them into, and that's what we're suffering from that today. It's been honed into a very precise and effective weapon to control people and to direct people, to control thoughts and actions of people.
Salaam Alaikum,
Salaam.
brother. How you doing?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah.
Sorry, this is my oh, you have some magnificent backgrounds. This is my luxurious shed in the garden. I was just gonna type in a private chat. I can't stay for very long because I gotta go put the kids to bed, and then I'll be back on inshallah afterwards. But yeah, it's very interesting discussions that's going on here. CL, nice to meet you finally. I've been watching a lot of your videos as well.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
The film that you were mentioning, I think I typed it in the chat. It's called Hollywoodism.
I think that may be the
you can. I think it's available for exactly. Yeah, and part of what was happening as well after Birth of a Nation, there was a series of films where they would have. This is before blaxploitation. They had a series of films where there would be films where it seemingly showed sympathy for the black people, but they were actually telling the Jewish narrative. So they would basically tell, and this is in the film as well, from what I remember. And I remember seeing it on a channel I think called Real Black. That's REELBLACK. So I suggest any of you to follow it. I mean, obviously it's not Islamic, but it's about what goes on in media and how it's controlled and how there are subtle tropes that happen continuously. Like even up until a couple of weeks ago, there was a Western with all black characters released, and even that has what they call tricknology in it. So like the trope of even if you have black people and it seems empowering, you can never have a black character overcome a white character, or you'd always have a white character as an ally. So like for instance in Django is one of the best pro-black films there is, but it still has the white person as the ally rather than just the demon sort of thing. So it's very rare to come across. But this one I add my 2 cents in there. Beautiful discussion. I have to jump off for a little bit now, and I'll be back probably in about 45-50 minutes, inshallah.
No problem, Sheikh. We'll still be here, inshallah.
It's nice to meet all of you as well. Thank you. I have a lot to talk about with you guys as well on this topic. So,
inshallah. Jazakallah khair. We'll be waiting.
Wa yakum jazak. Salam.
Excellent. And any of the brothers who want to join us, just come, click the link. I'll put the link up here. But I'll get to you. Everybody will get a chance, inshallah. So just hit the link, and then you'll be able to come in, inshallah. Right? So you mentioned about slavery in the North as well. What people don't understand is that slavery actually existed in Canada as well, even though that's not the official government narrative. But what happened during the exodus from the slaves from the South, when they would go to Canada through the Underground Railroad, there were farmers who would pretend to be helping these slaves, and then they would actually put them on their own farms as slaves, you know, whether it be wineries or whatever it was in the North at the time, you know what I mean? You know, because in Canada, they weren't growing cotton or whatchamacallit, or anything like that. They were mostly into orchardry. Like you had your grape wineries and your peach farms and your apple farms, and they were put on these farms as slaves. You understand? So it was like type of like an underground industry, but this existed, right? So, however, the whole point is there is an entire industry that is very well funded by governments and by corporations to ensure to ensure that Black people never kind of rise up and become anything independent. Many industries are dependent on our suffering, you know, in order to keep us poor and broke and unintelligent and uneducated. And it's up to us, especially since we have Islam, right, to guide ourselves and our people out of this situation. And once we have the Quran and the Sunnah, what you have now is a blueprint. We have to be following the blueprint in order to help our people. You understand? So, Brother Abdullah, can you hear us?
Brother Abdullah looking like a Sith Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just wait for Brother Abdullah and try. I think maybe perhaps his internet cut off there. Right? So there he is. Abdullah. Abdullah from Mauritania. MashaAllah. I think the internet in Mauritania is kind of hurting right now. Yeah. So go ahead. We'll wait for Brother Abdullah and then
But just to go back to the thing, we need to help ourselves, right? We need to do. I just want to mention two things. Even from a technically quote unquote non-Islamic perspective, if you look at how slavery was abolished, right? People tell you this grand narrative of like great white men, Lincoln in America, Wilberforce in England, and so on. But if you look at it, what happened is the Haitian Revolution. Right? It's like you look at the Haitian Revolution happened, and then all of a sudden England, which had been the biggest slave trading power in the world, this is something even a lot of Americans forget, is that England was the main supplier of slaves to the entire world, even in places like Brazil, South America, and so on. Haiti, the British were the main people supplying slaves. But what happened that all of a sudden these great people making so much money off of slavery, suddenly they just woke up one day and realized, oh, slavery's really bad. It's really bad that this slavery started. No, it's because the Haitians,
the goodness of their hearts.
That's what happened. William Wilberforce just like, oh, this is really, we're locking people in chains and forcing them to work. That's actually really bad, I say. The Haitians rose up, rebelled, freed themselves, defeated the British, the French, the Spanish.
And just to add there, at that time, the French was the most powerful superpower on earth. That's when Napoleon was ruling. Yes. Napoleon. The Haitians beat Napoleon. Nobody beat Napoleon, but the Haitians beat Napoleon. All right, so continue.
Right, so the Haitians defeated they defeated Napoleon. I remember Napoleon and the British were not cool. They were enemies. They were Napoleon and the British were the main enemies. The people who eventually captured Napoleon and put him on St. Helena, they were the British, right? They were enemies, but when the Haitians rebelled, they came together, and the Spanish as well. The Spanish are they're rivals historically, but they all came together. It's like, no, we can't let these slaves free themselves. And the Haitians freed themselves. Then they invaded what's now the Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, and they freed the Dominicans. The Dominicans have never forgiven the Haitians for freeing them from slavery, but that's another topic, right? And then the Haitians inspired Simon Bolivar, who was not black, to do his rebellions against the Spanish in South America, which is how you have all these independent countries in South America, and and they told him, we will give you all these weapons as long as you free the slaves. When you liberate Colombia, Ecuador, places like this, you free this. And the Haitians did that themselves. Nobody freed them. And then when they did this, the British, who had been trading all the slaves, turned around and they changed, because they knew that if they continued the slave trade, Jamaica would be another Haiti. The South of the United States would be another Haiti. And instead of there being one Haiti, it'd be Haitis all over the new world. Notice, by the way, for all the slave movies, there's never a movie about Haiti. There's all these movies about black people being oppressed. They even get a Django where he kills like one slave owner, but the real villain is the dark-skinned Uncle Tom. But you never get a movie about the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah, nobody's ever made a motion picture about that.
Yeah. Yep, and you won't either. Because the second you do that, you're going to get Haitian revolutions all over the earth. Yeah, you're talking about a people who defeated the most powerful army at that time with just machetes and the will to be free, and that was it. And up until this day, those Haitians are being punished for their fighting for freedom. Up until this very day, they're being punished by the French, they're being punished by the Americans, they're being punished by all these so-called friendly colonial powers that Easterns want to bust it open for every single day. You know what I mean? And anyways, Brother Abdullah.
Oh,
Brother Abdullah is having. He's in Mauritania. We got to be patient
But
with the
if you
brother.
think about it, even with the Haitian Revolution, if you look into the history of it, there were different players that were involved in it. One of the leaders of that revolution was called Bookman, and he was called Bookman because of the Quran. His mother gave him a Quran. His mother was a Muslim from Africa, and throughout all those different because there were various revolutions and slave rebellions in the Caribbean and in the South America. And you look at the one common denominator in all of them, there were Muslims either being the leaders or they were heavily involved in organizing and executing those revolutions or those revolts.
Well,
This was the
case in Brazil.
Brazil.
Yeah.
This was the case with the Gullas in Florida, and they're still Muslims to this very day, right from that slave, But yeah, it was the Muslims because Islam, it doesn't teach turn the other cheek, right? We teach either hijrah or jihad. That's it. We teach liberty or death. That's where it comes from. This whole concept of liberty or death. You know what I mean? Because we're not allowed to turn our backs on the battlefield. Either you fight or you die, and that's it. There are some things that are worse than death, and slavery just happens to be one of them. You understand? So with with black men now, there needs to be an entire shift in terms of thought and mentality. And we need to build confidence in black men in order to say, yes, you can actually accomplish tasks and accomplish long-term goals in order to carry out your task or whatnot. This type of
It looks like he's froze up. He'll probably unfreeze in a moment.
I don't know.
Thinking short term for immediate gratification.
Brother, your internet is freezing up. I don't know if you can hear me. Someone can send him a private chat. Well, let me talk until he gets free.
All right. Sorry about that. I lost the internet. Sorry about that, bro. Let's see if we get Abdullah on here. Abdullah, are you good now?
Abdullah.
I believe so. The internet has roaming blackouts here.
Yeah. Okay, how you doing?
So, alhamdulillah, everything's going well. All praises to Allah.
Alhamdulillah. What you got for us, bro?
I just wanted to add a little bit, from my own previous experience. So I converted to Islam when I was 18, like I told you before. Prior to that, I was a gang member, committing crimes, doing things like that, before I ended up going to prison. So one thing that I just wanted to add was, we're required to learn history. When you're a gang member, a lot of us, especially from the older gangs, we're required to learn history, the history of the organization and things like that. And I always thought it was funny how the history tells us that when a lot of these groups first came about, the point of them was to protect the people from the Italians and people who are coming into the neighborhoods and doing things, and protecting them from the white people, and protecting them from this and from that. A lot of gangs were totally against selling drugs. That was something that was like a death sentence a long time ago, maybe during my father's era, because my father was a gang member, maybe a little bit before his era. That was something they didn't tolerate. But things started to creep in like with anything else. And then, my generation comes, and that's kind of what it is. If you're not doing it, then you're somehow in the wrong. You're not cool, or they're gonna call you a broke boy, things like that. And I kind of look back to when I study the Quran, and I see the story of like you mentioned earlier, of Musa. Before Musa was given his message and task, one thing that the Pharaoh decided he wanted to do was he decided to kill all of the firstborn sons and leave the women, and leave the girls.
Yes. This is an important
he decided
point.
to kill. Right. And so we look at it in our times, and if you bring this argument, someone might say, oh, well, that's not going on today. But maybe in 2022, they're not going and taking babies by the foot and dropping them in the Nile. But this is a different type of genocide. This is a different type of warfare. This is a war for the minds. And if you can keep the slave.
He was Mr. Fire.
He was making an amazing point. But I just wanted to add what the brother was saying, right? Is that this idea of the destruction of Black boys, not only is it well documented, but even the enemy documents that. They document their intentional destruction of Black boys. You understand? They document how they they ran the Tuskegee experiment on Black men. They document how the Planned Parenthood was essentially meant to abort Black babies and even prevent them from even being born to begin with. They document how the war on drugs was a means in order to criminalize Blackness. They document how 3 strikes was meant to make sure that Black men were permanently put in jail for minor crimes and keep them. They themselves are documenting this. So what the brother is saying about making that parallel between the destruction of boys at the time of Pharaoh and the destruction of Black boys in this time is, in fact, a proper contextual parallel. Why would Allah put something like that in the Quran unless we were going to see it happen again in our time? You feel me? Go ahead.
Also, just to put like a response that's like just a touch away from this, but it's sort of important to get the bigger perspective, is if we look at the story of if Abdullah's back, I'll let him talk and then I'll go.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Abdullah.
Hey, I'm not gonna be long-winded because there's no telling when it's gonna go out again. So I'm gonna try to hurry up and get to my point.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying that if you keep the slave in a mentality where he's docile and he might be aggressive to the other slaves, which benefits the master, but he'll never bite the master's hand. Then essentially, if you essentially castrated the man, or you've castrated your enemy. By doing this, you have complete control over the whole race of people themselves. Their women are now dependent on you because whether they like it or not, they need a man. And the man, there's really nothing he can do. He's more of your ward than an independent figure. He's more of a ward of the slave master, even if he's not in chains anymore. So the point that I was trying to make is that we can look into our society, especially specifically in America, and we can see this happening. And we might as well be thrown in the rivers, because the women are raising the new men who are coming along, and the men aren't necessarily men anymore. With all respect to myself and to you men, I mean it in the sense of men really aren't at the level that they should be. They're not really the warriors that they should be, and it's led us to a point where we're completely dependent upon our enemy. And the last thing that I want to say is we can also look to the story of Musa for the solution. Allah did not say to Musa, hey, call those people to Islam and remain there and thrive. He said, leave. Now, am I saying don't call the people? No, I'm call them to Islam, but you have to separate. These people do not like you. They plot against you, and they are obstinate against Allah. We have to leave and separate from these people if we want success.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for mentioning that. And this is something that it's not only pragmatic, but just common sense. You know, black people are the only people that want to unite with everybody else except for themselves. You know what I mean? Like, you don't find as in the black community so much this type of pointing the finger at the enemy. We're fighting each other all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You feel me? All the time. We have so much work against each other and no work against the enemy. Because fighting a black man fighting another black man is easy. It's simple, you know. You can do that, but to fight, you know, your oppressor, who has weaponry and the technology and the laws and of the whatever land they're in is on their side, then you will never have a one up against them. That's the difficult thing. You understand? To fight the one who's in power is the difficult thing. You feel me? But we're Muslim, so who is the ultimate power?
Allah.
Allah, exactly. So who should we be trying to get on our side to defeat this enemy?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah. You feel me? You think Allah loves these people? They're wicked. They're absolutely wicked. You know what I mean? There's no way Allah loves those people. So why are we in this humiliating situation? There has to be something that we're doing wrong, right?
Or not doing right, definitely.
Exactly, or not doing right. You feel me? And absolutely, one of the things that we are not doing right is we are always this type of in the face of ourselves all the time. You know, we have these issues with all these incredible social issues, and we're not looking at these social issues. You know what I mean? We're looking at ourselves all the time, and you know, with the Salafis, they always talking about, oh, the solution is Tawheed and Aqidah.
And 40 and you really want to lose weight and keep it off, there's an ancient exotic loophole that melts belly fat every...
What is that?
Who is it?
That might have been me. I was looking something up. The commercial came on.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, I was looking up the name of a particular documentary. I haven't finished watching the documentary. I just started. It's called Bastards of the Party, which kind of collaborates with the brother. The brother was talking about earlier about the history of the gangs. So it talks about the history of the LAPD, the Crips, and of course the Black Panthers. But that history echoes across the country. I mean, there's another documentary about the brother Chief Malik, Jeff Fort. In Chicago, who started the Black Peace Star Rangers and Al Rukin. Same thing with him. That history between the Black Panthers and some of the
and the gangs, yes,
yeah,
that's
the
right.
So-called street gangs,
yes,
and their origins.
That's correct. Yes, the Crips and the Bloods actually.
Yeah, but not just the Crips, the Bloods,
the GDs,
BDs, Al Rukin, you know. All those different groups, different street organizations across the country. They all had like you said, back in the 50s and the 60s and maybe the early 70s, they had their roots in trying as protectionist groups. You know, people trying to Black people coming together, Black youths coming together to protect themselves from the violence of, you know, Italians and Irish. And these other groups who were out to target Black people and target Black neighborhoods, you know, and of course, you know, you have the FBI and other entities who come and infiltrate these groups and they corrupt the groups.
To this day, let's be very clear.
So you want to talk about the gang, Chicago was they're shooting each other in Chicago, but you have to go back to the origins about what those groups were when they were originally founded. Who infiltrated those groups and who steered those groups into illegal activity? Because even the brother Chief Malik, Jeff Fort, when he finally got arrested, my understanding is that he wasn't even in Chicago. He was in Mississippi, and a FBI asset came to him to entrap him, and it caused him to get in prison at the moment. So, you know, it's not just, you know, Black people being pathological and violent. You know, there's another side to that story that they don't like to talk about.
You know, I want to go back to what Bilal was he was bringing up earlier. And it's talking about the people, the Salafiyun. are talking about the Tawheed and Aqidah and so forth. Those things, but certainly there's no success without those things. However, you have to do work. The example is the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They had Tawheed and they had a correct Aqidah, but they did work. They created economy. They created structure, right? And that's one of the things here. You find a lot of the now quote unquote Salafis fighting against each other, warring, having opposition amongst each other, and not really following the dawah of or the minhaj of the Salaf. They're not really following it in a lot of ways. Cooperation is one of the things. وَتَعَوُّنَ عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَوُّنَ عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Right? Helping one another, cooperation in khayr, in righteousness, in good conduct, in developing, and not cooperating in that which opposes it. And so a lot of times we find that that's what's happening, and we're failing to work together to establish things, schools, businesses. Okay, correct Aqidah and correct Minhaj, yes. But what about the business? What about working? What about establishing structure? Things that so that we can provide jobs, training, education, and housing, and the ability is here. We're in a place in the States. We have so much potential, so much opportunity, not only for ourselves here, but to affect internationally. We have the ability to affect situations globally, but we don't have our act together. So therefore, how can you affect? You can't even build your own schools. You can't even establish your own businesses that cooperate and build. We can't have our own what do you call it, the supply chain, right? Why don't we have African Americans and Muslims who have farms, and that we have them that have grocery stores, and we have them that have so what I'm saying is that there's some other work that we have to do, and we can't be focused on one particular, like you said, we're staying in the masjid, and there is no success without the correct aqidah and the correct minhaj, because we said who is going to help us except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we look for. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, we ask him to guide us upon the straight path, but we also say iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Right? It is Allah that we ask for help and guidance and assistance, and we're not deluded in understanding and thinking we're going to ask someone else. First and last is tawakkul billah, tawakkul, the complete reliance and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that doesn't mean that, as a brother said to me the other day, he said, okay, so would you cross the street? Would you blindfold yourself and cross the street? Well, that's not tawakkul. That is making a mockery, and it is a misrepresentation of what tawakkul is. Tawakkul is not that. It is not being blinded. It's about working. It's about using the means. It is about understanding that total reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not calling on others and so forth. But anyway, that's I just wanted to add that point.
I just wanted to ask Allah to bless Sister Tika again for her generosity, and may Allah multiply it for 1,000-fold. Ameen. May Allah forgive her sins and raise her ranks in Jannah. Brothers and sisters, please share this podcast. It's incredibly important. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. We want to see some new subscribers on the channel. I know a lot of you guys watch these podcasts, but you don't subscribe. It's important that you subscribe, because who else is? I don't know anybody else is doing. You guys know anybody else is doing this? I personally don't know anybody else is doing this. You know what I mean? But brother Naeem, كيفك?
Alhamdulillah, tamam. Alhamdulillah.
What you got for us, bro?
Alhamdulillah. Yes, I was just listening, and the Sheikh, I believe his name Yasin. Sheikh, he mentioned about businesses, and just yesterday I was told, basically I was, is some of the, how in this country the black people are not given the resources, but those coming are given the resources,
100%.
And so I was told that, what's very important is that once a Muslim comes to the West and gets such resources and money, that they should have empathy for their brothers and sisters and spread their wealth, as Islam dictates. Help your brothers, and this is how, inshallah, a solution can come about.
Yes, there has to be a willingness to do that, though. Like, what we have to understand, I read it from the book from the brother Michael Abraham, right? The book about your kids in public schools, right? Is that the whole immigration, and he's writing this book just to help Muslim families in deal with their kids in public school. He's not like doing like what we're doing, but he's mentioning an important point, and that is immigrants come over here, right? Particularly the Arabs and the South Asians, and they want to be classified as white. They want to be classified as white. Why? Because they understand the benefits that they get when they're classified as white. You understand? So also, Dr. Claude Anderson, he mentions this all the time, that affirmative action was implemented specifically to help Black people. And do you know how much affirmative action helps? You know how many Black people it helps in percentage-wise? 0.1%. You understand? Meanwhile, 50% of the beneficiaries of affirmative action programs happen to be white women. Why? Because they moved from affirmative action helping Black people, and they said, no, let's help all minorities. And who is a minority in the West, in Western contextualization? Anybody who's not a white man is considered a minority.
No, but even white men can be minorities if they're gay.
Homosexuality.
A gay white man is a minority as well.
That's a new one. So now, this is how resources are basically intentionally kept back from Black people. Because now, instead of having programs specifically for Black people, they put Black people with all the minorities. So everybody's minority. Now, as you mentioned, even the gay people are minorities. So if a white man is gay, he can benefit from these programs. So what you have is now you have an influx of Muslims from the East who benefit off the programs that Black people actually fought and bled for, and they turn around and spit in the face of the same Black people that they benefit from the programs from. You understand? So they come here, they build masajid on stolen land, and a land that was built by stolen people, and spit in the faces of both of them. And then they wonder why Muslims can't go anywhere. You feel me? So in my humble opinion, right, this is just my opinion, Black people need to focus on themselves, right? We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah. We don't need anybody else's permission. Nobody else is willing to help us anyway. And we have to ask Allah to help us. Jazakallah khair, brother Yasin, hayakallah, may Allah reward you and multiply it for you 1,000-fold. Ameen. Sheikh Yasin. Yeah.
Can I just jump in quickly?
Yeah, go ahead, Sheikh.
Since we're talking about the topic of immigrants and also the topic of the Salafi Dawah, right? With the greatest of respect, and I just want to be clear that I'm not saying this to write off all the ulama who are overseas and so on. With the greatest of respect to the scholars who are not in the West, there is like one of the things that has affected Black converts even disproportionately is that people will come into the deen, right, and they will become Salafi, and they will be reformed, and then over a dispute that might even be a personal dispute, or in some cases, not naming any names, not saying any specific scholars, it might even be something that the government wants to push, right? There will be an argument between two Salafis in an Arab country, two Shi'ok, right? And then we converts in the West who had nothing to do with that debate. We had nothing to do with anything that was going on in that position. We get forced to take sides. I mean, you've documented this very well. And then we break apart our communities and we fight each other. And instead of, again, this is not an attack on Salafis, this is not an attack on the Shi'ok overseas, but this is a reality that has affected us, where instead of being able to build something constructive, to grow and develop as communities, we got overly caught up in being, as Sheikh Danjuma told me, foot soldiers in other people's wars, right?
Yep.
Like wars between, like that don't even really concern us. It's an issue in over there, maybe. It might even be a personal conflict. But then we get caught up and say, no, you're with Sheikh Fulan, you're with Sheikh Fulan. We must separate from you. You are Ahlul Bidah, we can't sit under you. And then so how many black people do you see who end up insulting like black people, like black scholars in the West, like Bilal Phillips, like Abdullah Hakim Quick, because they're seen as affiliated with some sheikh that is not aligned with their sheikh, right? Someone who's connected to some sheikh, that they get a fatwa saying, oh, Bilal Phillips and all these, and Abdullah Hakim Quick, or even like Mufti bin Munir, these people are all in some ways deviated according to someone who, with the greatest of respect, doesn't understand the circumstances of our context, which is not necessarily entirely like understandable, because he lives in a different context. We don't understand his context fully either, right? But when people will take his opinion and apply to the context where we are developing and growing, we are coming out of trauma that remains ongoing, and instead of being able to build up our communities, we are turning on each other based on something that is important. That's something that if you were to talk to someone who was even slightly outside of this context, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, even someone who's Muslim and not in like the hardcore Salafi thing, they say, are you with Sheikh Fulan or Sheikh Fulan? Like, who are you even talking? I don't even know who you're talking about, right? But for us, it becomes do or die. You know?
And I think part of the problem is that we're not focused on what matters to us here, right? We have a lot of work to do, as we were pointing out earlier, because we don't recognize that work and we don't have a plan. We're looking at things like as you mentioned, that have no impact on us one way or the other. Right here, we have a lot of work to do in our locales, wherever we are. And we need to pay attention to that and put a plan together and begin to work together on that. For instance, I often have a certain amount of money. I say, you know what, if we had a plan, I have 1,000 or I have 5,000 or 10,000 that I would like to support that plan with, because it's going to move us forward, right? And if there are others like me, and there are, who say, you know what, if we had a plan, I would be involved, but I can't get caught up into this nonsense. And so they back out. They totally disassociate themselves from any effort at all.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
Exactly. Rightfully so.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Because we're wasting energy. We're wasting resources.
This is the importance of Black men taking responsibility for their education and their intelligence and how they move. You understand? What you mentioned is so important, Sheikh. Sorry to cut you off, but it's so important to understand this one concept, that yes, we do actually have allies. We have allies in the Black community, in the white community, in the Indo-Pak community, in the Arab community. There are people who actually want to help us, but they're looking at us like, we can't help you until you fix this first.
Right.
That's exactly how they're looking. It's a total mess. Get this stuff fixed up first, and we'll gladly help. There are people who genuinely want to see us win. Not everybody's against us. You feel me?
We seem to be more against ourselves than anything else. We stop us from being successful in building. We stop us. We stop us from creating schools for education for our children. Right?
Yeah.
From making our businesses successful. We stop us from that. And so if things come together, we'll see so much benefit. And then, you know what? And we all know this. I'm sure many of us have experienced this in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up opportunity doors from where you didn't even know that they existed. You had no expectation of it, but because of your work, your reliance, your attitude toward putting Allah first in your life and guiding yourself and your family and your community based on that, that open up doors and then power and izzah, the responsibility and the respect becomes yours only by the permission of Allah Ta'ala. You can't work your way to that just without a reliance on Allah. It comes and it's there waiting for us. But we have to, as we were saying earlier, have a plan. We have to come together, put aside all of that. And as you and the brother were pointing out, we're more worried about what's going on between this one and that one, and none of that has any bearing on us here.
Well, the sister Tika, she made a point about that. She said, and I put in the screen here, don't be mistaken. This is by design. And I believe that 1,000%.
Yes.
Because the dawah was growing and then it wasn't. And I keep saying that all the time. And what are the effects that this type of overly dogmatic, robotic mentality in terms of religion, what are the effects that it had on that generation that was born during that time when we were doing that?
Can I just make a comment on this? On this
Again?
exact situation? If you think about it, if you look back to the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, the idea in the West of a black Muslim, right? In the minds of black people who are not Muslim, in the minds of society, the images of Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, the ideas of a black Muslim was of somebody who was very empowered, but also someone who had a lot of morality, someone who was standing up to white supremacy, someone who was reforming themselves, someone who was doing good in their communities. And it was something that was respected by black people who were not Muslim, right? Afrocentrics who were not Muslim respected Islam. And then even people in the streets, right, who may have been doing dirt, they respected the Muslims. They saw them as honorable people who could be looked up to. Is why a lot of people in the prison started to become Muslim. Right, man, look, Malcolm X himself had started off as Detroit Red, and then what happened? But then nowadays, like because of this overly dogmatic, let's be honest, foreign influence, I'm sure all of us at some point have been told, even maybe by someone who's black, that this is black nationalism, this is racism. We can't. Why are you talking about black issues? These people are not Muslim. But they're still out. They're still my people, right? I come from them.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Me personally, I make no qualms about. I am a black nationalist. I am a black nationalist, and I am about black nationalism. And if anybody wants to come and debate me, I'm open to this conversation about why I'm a black nationalist and whatnot. However, every other people group, they have their nations, they have their passports, they have their people, they have their tribes. And it's only black people running around the earth talking about we don't need a nation. Since 1916, after World War I, right, the enemy has been dividing the world based upon nation states. And after 1945, every country that you see today is built upon nation states. Not a single country on the planet Earth is run, owned, and controlled by black people, its own resources. What you have are figureheads, for example, in African countries, you have figureheads for imperialistic powers that rape the resources out of Africa and send them to Europe. You understand? And tax their own people from these resources, 30% taxes to send to Britain or France or whatever country it is. What does Britain actually produce? They don't produce anything. But why are they so wealthy? They're wealthy because of imperialism.
Well, look at the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, right? What is his money rooted in? In apartheid in South Africa.
Apartheid system in South Africa, yeah. You know what I mean? So this is what people have to understand. You're not living in the time of the Prophet. You're living in a reality that is 2021, 2022. This is the reality of the situation. If you are a black person in this time period, you are living under the control of other people groups. That is nothing you can say about, I'm not about this black stuff. I'm not about, nothing you say changes that reality. Meanwhile, other people groups control and own their own resources, whether it's, of course, Europeans, whether it's Orientals, even you can say to a large extent, even South Asians. Even though they are under imperialistic rule, they do to a large by and large, kind of own, except for I wouldn't say Bangladesh so much because Bangladesh is a slave state, right? But they own their resources, you know. But anyways, go ahead, bro. Who wants to jump in here?
Just to build on what we were discussing here, it's like, and the thing is, about black people who will take on other people's conflict. I saw something interesting in South Africa. In South Africa, you have politician Julius Malema, who is really the voice of the black nationalist movement in South Africa. Even now, where the white media in South Africa is trying to make the problem other African immigrants in South Africa, he stood up for those people. The interesting thing about his party, the EFF in South Africa, remember, they're not Muslims. They do work with some Muslims in Cape Town. Even this is black nationalists who are not Muslims, will hold protests for Palestine, right? Yeah. It's like when Muslims come to us and say, "Oh, brother, you can't be a black nationalist." Well, I can bring you examples of black nationalists who are not even Muslim, right? Who will stand up for Muslim causes, right?
Yeah. But when a Muslim is standing up for Palestinian causes, that's not nationalism.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. What are you really trying to tell it? And this is the killer. You can't pull that old time weak stuff on us anymore. You know, black people are actually waking up now. Like straight up, there is an actual shift in the mentality of black people. And black people, and me personally, I'm ready to cut off the ignorant bottom feeders in our community in order to build our people up, if it comes down to that, because we dealt with you before. You are the easiest people to be infiltrated. The easiest. You are the easiest people to be manipulated into perpetuating your own destruction, because you don't educate yourself, and you believe in Islam the same way you believed in Christianity. So when Jesus was Lord and everything like that, and Jesus goes, and a change gonna come, and all this kind of stuff, you bring that to Islam and you practice that in Islam. All you have to do is have the correct Aqidah and follow the Quran and Sunnah, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. And when you challenge people on what you mean by that, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They legit don't know what they mean to sit down and do. That's what they mean. Sit down, do nothing, wait for Allah to come and help you. That's what they mean. Go. I believe CL, you wanted to say something? CL.
I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying about us bringing the mentality, that Baptist Pentecostal mentality into the masjid. So if somebody just showed up in the neighborhood and purchased a storefront, and you put on a suit and some pinky ring and some gazelle glasses, he could be a pastor and get he got people hanging off his every word, and he'll tell people what to do, and what to do in their own houses, what to do with their own with their own family members, and people will live, because that's the pastor. That's the pastor.
Exactly.
The pastor got a direct connection with God, so everything he says that comes out of his mouth can't possibly be wrong or questioned. Are you crazy? And we bring the same exact mentality right into Islam.
Exactly.
So now you got the student of knowledge. They got the student of knowledge. It doesn't matter. He says something it clicks in your mind. I don't know if that sounds right, but you can't question it. You can't question what he just said. You can't. He said
it with Sheikh Mukbil.
Exactly. He went to Yemen. And you can't question him. He went to Yemen for a whole entire year.
I think
question him.
I think what happens. What happens is that we get into image worship. That's what it is. It's and as Bilal was pointing out earlier, sometimes there's a test. What's your opinion on this person or that person, right? And so that starts going around. But I take I wouldn't say a slightly different position on being African American, being black here in America from the diaspora and so forth. My position is that I say, well, my ummah I'm part of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not part of another ummah. I'm not I don't have two allegiances. So my brothers are those who believe like I believe, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says, Inna that verily the believers are brother. And there's a part of a part of that statement, it means only the believers are brothers, right? Now I'm African American and I want to call my people to Islam. But like Lot, like others who are prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who when their people didn't heed to the call, they left them, right? They had to leave them because they couldn't be among them. So I don't for instance, there was that big thing with Black Lives Matter and so forth, and people were going out and marching with Black Lives Matter. But when it came out that part of Black Lives Matter agenda was LGBT, whatever, those initials, um, that was a surprise to people. We can't control their agenda. We can't control what they're on. So do I support the African American causes and and uplifting their condition? Yes, but I say that can only be done, only and absolutely only be done by from an Islamic perspective, from a completely Islamic perspective. Whether they become Muslim or not, we call them. And whether they are Muslim or not, we are concerned about their condition when they're getting shot down, they're getting injustices in the courts. When one sister down in Florida fires a warning shot for a weapon that she legally owned, and I forget how much time she ends up doing, right? And someone of another complexion does
Kyle
the same.
Rittenhouse.
Huh?
Kyle Rittenhouse, who actually killed two
Right,
people.
right. And got less time, right? I didn't get any time, but no time.
To
Got
white
no
people
time
as
at
well.
all, right? And so the thing is that what we have to understand, yes, I'm African American, and I in no way deny that history, that ancestry. I have, my heart goes out, and I want to call them to Islam because that's the only way that they will be saved. However, I don't adopt those causes that are, you understand what I'm saying? I'm not getting in bed with them. I'm not tying my ship to that anchor, right? My ship is the Ummah of Muhammad, so is the Quran and the Hadith, it's the Quran and the Sunnah solely. And part of that is, and we never give it up. What was Salman al-Farsi? We know he was Persian, right? He didn't have to, it was a recognition of who he was and where he was from. That wasn't denied. We know that Bilal ibn Rabah was Ethiopian. There's no, so we're not, it doesn't require us to shed out and become Arabs or become Pakistanis or whatever. Islam incorporates all of that, and you can be who you are, but it has to be in the context or influenced by, Islam. So you can wear your traditional garb, whatever it is. But as long as the Prophet was saying, they were Arabs, and the Arabs wore imamas, they wore the lihya, but the Muslims trimmed their mustache and grew their beard. They wore the cap under. There was some distinct. They had the tail. They wore the izar like the other Arabs, but it was above the ankle, or so forth. There were certain characteristics that they incorporated, which made them identified as Muslims, even though they looked like everybody else around them.
The thing about that, Sheikh, right, is that Black people tend to want to absorb other people's cultures.
You're right. I agree with that.
And we see what other people are doing as superior to us.
Because we don't like being a lot of Black people don't like being Black.
We've been programmed that way. That's
right. And they tell you, straight up, especially in the Salafi community. They'll tell you, I ain't about that Black stuff. No, don't tell me. They're like straight up about it.
Let me tell you, hold up. We're talking about going back to the beginning. Frances Cress Welsing, she talked about the psychological things that were being expressed. I remember the first show I saw her on. It was People Are Talking. There was a white woman and a white guy, and she was being interviewed, and she was doing her thing, right? So the white guy had on a black leather suit. Okay. So she talked about his and how, you know, people tanning and all of that. They really she went into the psychological message there, right? Now, when I was a young man, and that's getting personal, and nobody laughed at me, but my favorite superhero was Superman. I used to walk miles to get his comic books. Superman. I was Superman. And I had twin beds in my room, and I used to tie a cape, the towel around my back. And
I did that
and
too.
I would jump from
From
bed to
one to the
bed,
other. Yeah.
right? I'm flying. But guess what? I asked myself, I'm 6 years old. I asked myself, how come in my mind, whenever I'm Superman, I can't be me? I got to have a white image, right?
That had popped in my mind too, as well.
Hold up. Now, there was a black insurance company out of Philadelphia, I think. And I forget the name of it. They may still exist. But anyway, they had an advertisement back in the 80s, I think. Maybe it was a little earlier, but I think it was in the 80s. And there was a little boy standing in the mirror. And he had, just like me, he had his towel down his back, and he was standing there looking at himself. No, in the mirror was a white Superman. And when I looked at that, because my major in school was educational psychology, one of the things that made me fall in love with, I told you, Frances Cress Welsing, because she really was hitting a lot of the subliminal messages that are coming to us. And
She
how
was way ahead of her time.
Yeah, really. You know, and that
she was largely rejected at that time, but now everybody's like, no, she was spot on.
Right,
Okay,
and she was. There's no doubt about it. The thing is that she was pulling the sheet off of the ways of control that that the system, that the powers that be, so to speak, already knew and were implementing, as we discussed earlier, going back, controlling information and images. And so they knew what they were doing to us, but we didn't know what was being done to us. Right. And so, as the brother pointed out, and you pointed out, it's like we got that. It's a self-hatred. It's the wanting to shed that image that we've been given for an image that we feel we can accept and become anybody else but us. Right. We'll take on any cultural identity.
Well, we'll take on any cultural identity, but you know what we as black Muslims will do? We'll try to be Arabs, we'll try to be Pakistanis, but you'll never see us trying to be African Muslims.
Right.
Islam, look how long the history of Islam is in Africa, which is literally our history. For those of us who are taking the diaspora, we were cut off from it. But if you go into our roots, that is, look at roots itself. Kunta Kinte himself is from the Gambia, right? He's from the Muslim people in the Gambia, right? But we black Muslims, we try to be Arabs, we try to be Pakistanis, we try to be even Turks, right? But we never try to be African Muslims. That's not something we try to do, right? We don't want to be like that. No.
I want to give Brother CL and then Brother Bilal and then Brother Naeem, and then we'll leave it open, inshallah. Go ahead.
You know, from my memories as a child, you know, I do remember African American Muslims who were taking on aspects of West African Islam, even, from the stuff my father used to be into, like the Last Poets and everything like that, the way they dressed, the Congos, the whole thing. And so that did exist to a certain extent, but it seems like at a certain point in the move to try to move to a more authentic understanding and move to the Sunnah, attached to that was put this understanding attached to it. Moving to the Sunnah was, and when you move to the Sunnah, you need to get rid of that black stuff. So those two things became attached to each other, and I think we're just now waking up to understand that those two things didn't have to be attached to each other. That was flim flam. We got flim flam.
Yep, we got played. We got bamboozled, hoodwinked, run amok. Religious straight.
Probably, alhamdulillah, you mentioned to me a couple weeks ago about this the sheikh that was around the same time as Bin Baz, wasn't it? From Nigeria.
Sheikh Uthaymeen or
Sheikh Uthaymeen.
Yeah.
Uthaymeen, Nam. And the thing is, like, I embraced Islam at like age 19 in 2005. And when I came to the Sunnah, alhamdulillah, because I've spent a long time before I started practicing. When I started practicing, then I fell into the Sunnah. I didn't see anyone that really looked like me in the initial. Like, my thoughts of who was upon the way of the Salaf was, alhamdulillah, I wasn't really brought into or introduced really to like the Spubs lot or anything like that. But the imagery that was there, I didn't really see anyone that looked like me, and and that's not through. I don't believe it was anything through like willful blocking of anything like that. It's just I just didn't see it. So when you mentioned that Sheikh to me, I was like, subhanallah, I just didn't know. And then you have like Sheikh Okasha and stuff like that now and then. So for now, like when I think of black people on the Sunnah, I have in my idea, I have the people in my locality because I live in London, as you can probably tell from my accent. There's some in London, alhamdulillah. And then I would think of then some of the brothers that are now coming out through Philly and basically in the US and Canada and stuff. So now I'm watching stuff like the 5-2 Initiative, like Brother Mufti Munir and brothers like that, alhamdulillah. And to the point of like taking on African culture in Islam, whenever I consider that, like when I think of African Muslims, I think of probably the Sudanese or the Somali community. And the first image that tends to come to my mind is the Sufi aspect of those traditions, of those religions. Yeah. And that's
I just want to clarify, right?
Not there's anything wrong with Sufi.
No, just a sheikh that we were talking about. Now that you mention it, it wasn't Sheikh Uthaymeen, it's Sheikh Umar Falata. Yeah. Who was a contemporary of Sheikh Bin Baz.
Nah, this is what you meant.
We're not talking about, we're talking about contemporary.
Exactly.
You understand?
And so the fact that I never know this name, but I know Bin Baz, I know Uthaymeen, I know Albani, alhamdulillah, rahimullah, ajma'in. Like, I just didn't hear about this brother, alhamdulillah, the Sheikh.
Yeah. And there's what you call it? Muhammad Al-Aman al-Jami, right? Who's another big scholar from Africa, right? Who had assassination attempts against him. Okay, that's how big he was.
And he wrote about his Africanity as well. Muhammad
Exactly. He wrote a book about African Islam or something like that. I can't remember. What's the name of the book?
Yeah, Islam in Africa. And it's translated in English. He was Somali from Ogaden, which is in Ethiopia, but he wrote about the Muslims in West Africa. He wrote about the Swahili Muslims. Yeah. And again, you can find the PDF online, right, about Islam in Africa by Sheikh Muhammad Aman al-Jami, rahimahullah. Right? Yeah, also, another alim is Sheikh Omar Falata's teacher, who also taught. If you go down the list of Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, Ibn Jibril, any of the big Saudi ulama, if you go and you read a bio of them, of their teachers, one of the names you'll see on that list, which is why I'm Al-Afriqi, is Sheikh Abdurrahman Al-Afriqi, who was a Fulani man from Mali. Who before the Saudis had entered into taking over Makkah and Medina and with Ibn Saud, he had in the city of Makkah, he had made Hajj, and he's learned, and he became upon the way of the Sunnah before the Saudis had established themselves, when it was still mostly a Sufi context.
Yeah.
And the Dar al Hadith in Makkah, he was the sheikh. It was the second sheikh of that Dar al Hadith. When the founder, who was Indian, Sheikh Al Madani, I think, died, he became in charge of the Dar al Hadith in Makkah, and he was from the teachers of Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, and of course, Omar Falata saw him as his most important teacher, because there's that, and that shows even there for them that for Sheikh Omar Falata, he felt that connection with seeing somebody African, and I remember Sheikh Abu Sama mentioning in one of his talks briefly that when he first went to study in the in Masjid al-Nabawi, Omar Falata was there, and he went and sat with Omar Falata because Omar Falata was the only black sheikh who was there. And one of Abu Sama's stories, I remember him mentioning it.
Yeah. So go ahead, Bilal. Continue.
No. This is the point I was making. Was that basically I was ignorant of the scholarship from Africa that's contemporary at this time. So
most
now
people
my
are.
eyes are being open to it now, alhamdulillah. Because I mean, those who say that there's no importance in culture as long as the message is the same, that's not entirely true. Because I mean, representation matters.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. This is just an unrelated comment, but I thought of this the other day. It was like, alhamdulillah, I'm a reaver and the only reaver in my family, but may Allah guide the rest of my family to Islam.
Ameen.
I wondered to myself the other day is if my coming to Islam was Allah answering the dua of one of my ancestors.
I thought of that too.
I think about this all the time when you mention that. Like, I like this is something that I think about. I wonder. You know what I mean? Because here we are, and Black people becoming Muslim is a natural thing. So much so that even our families are very mixed because so many of us convert. You feel me? And I don't know. Anyway, continue. Go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off. I'm just sparking conversation.
Yeah. It's good. Thanks for mentioning that point, man.
Actually, that point. There was a Congolese brother who said that to me. He said that to me. He's Congolese Muslim. He's also a Riva, but he's in Africa. And he told me, he's like, you're from slaves. Your family is as Mauritian, because that's where I'm from. A lot of us were taken from Senegal and Gambia, right? Where the people, Fulanis, Wolof, Sarah, those people are Muslim. And he said to me, he's like, exactly what you said. He's like, one of your ancestors probably made dua that Islam would survive in his family when it was being suppressed. And he's like, you should, and they even mentioned some idea about the righteous man leaving wealth. And it's something very much that we should think about.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. Sheikh Naeem, go ahead.
No, I don't actually have much thoughts, except for the subjects that recently have been covering. If you can get the Professor Danjuma Bihari onto one of these lives, perhaps he could provide much insight on some of the history and.
I would love to have him. You sent me the link with him, right? Mashallah, he's very sharp, very.
I have a connection with Sheikh Danjuma Bihari. I've been talking to him for a few weeks now on Facebook. I have a connection with him. Wow. So if you want, I could even, if you want someone to link, I could even
just make sure that he understands about the channel, right? So we don't want to shock him, right? But if he's okay, right? Because to be honest, a lot of Shayuk and Tulab Alum, they support the channel behind the scenes, right? They won't actually come on the channel, right? Which is okay because we have work to do here, right? And they can't be in, it'll be bad. It'll be bad for them. You know what I'm saying? So he has to understand like what we're doing here. And if he's good, no problem. We'll do it, inshallah.
All right. Yeah, inshallah. I'll talk to him, inshallah.
No problem. And Sheikh Yassin, you got anything for us?
No, only thing I want to add that what we're doing here is so important, and that we should continue to do this and also to develop an action plan to move to the point where we can really organize and put a plan together to do a project, whatever that project is, but a project that moves us toward the things we're discussing in terms of addressing our problems in a collective way, and also something that can the ones that were mentioned and not mentioned that are sort of involved in non-beneficial sort of activities, so to speak. I don't know how to put that. I'm just trying to make it in a way that I know we need to come together. That's it.
Absolutely.
As we said earlier, that verse of the Quran where Allah says, we need to implement that. If we have the correct, and as I said before, there's no success without the correct aqidah and minhaj. There's no success without that. But that doesn't mean that we're constricted, that it's so tight like that. We have to know the history of Islam. Amongst the companions, they had differences, but not in the Aqidah, but they may have had differences, a difference of opinion on how we arrive at an end. We can work with that. We can work together and build. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to put my efforts and my wealth where my mouth is. If we put
Alhamdulillah.
together a plan, I'm ready. I'm
If I
ready
can,
for that.
if I
A
can
For
just
sure.
Go ahead, Naeem. Go ahead.
a small follow up to that. To the ayah وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى is just a reminder of حلف الفضول and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said about it. لو دعيت به في الإسلام لأجبت. If I am called to it in Islam, I would have answered.
I would
No.
do it.
No.
For those of you who don't know what Hilful Fudul is, I'll just explain it real quickly. Hilful Fudul is a contract that the Prophet he signed before he was called on his mission to spread Islam, right? So it's essentially at the time of Jahiliyyah with the tribes of Mecca, and it was essentially a pact of the tribes of Mecca who were Jahili, they're mushrikun, to be just to people who are coming and doing businesses from outside, because a man came and did some business with one of the Meccans and they treated him horrifically, didn't pay him. So he went on one of the mountains, he made this poetry that made them, like, basically it touched their hearts. You're right. So they signed a track called Fudul, the contract of Fudul. What's Fudul again? Fudul is, I can't remember. Anyway, it's like benefit or something. I can't remember. The contract, the Treaty of Fudul, right? The Treaty of Fudul, right? So, excellence. Thank you. Excellence. Of excellence, right? So he made this pact with the mushrikeen of the tribes around Mecca to ensure the safety and the protection of visitors coming from outside of Mecca. And he said he would do it again. He would do it again. You understand? So this idea that you can't work with kuffar, I don't know where Black Muslims get this from. You know, other than the enemy. This is an enemy. This is the enemies,
right?
Who are pushing this stuff on you. You know, I want to come back because I want to get back to this point, but maybe a little later. Right, I want to stay on for at least another half hour if you guys don't mind. Right, if you guys are good with that. Right, and also I'm leaving a link in the comments. If anybody else wants to join us, please. So, like, this is for the community. This is for the community, and share. Make sure you share this. Like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, it's imperative that you subscribe to this channel. It's imperative, right? So, anyways, with the baby boy syndrome, we've talked about how media has exacerbated this problem. We've also talked about how the infighting amongst Black people has caused our youth to be stuck perpetually in a state of confusion, right? And we have to talk about also the responsibility and the role of Black men in raising Black boys in order for them to become men. Right, so I'll let Brother CL, you go first.
Salaam Alaikum. I was just going to tell you, brothers, that I'm going to have to dip out of the conversation, but just to make a last point on that particular subject, just like I said when I first came in, that, you know, Black people, especially Black men, have always been a commodity. You know, something to sell, something to use, something to utilize, and not something to respect or treat as human. That plays in with the whole baby boy syndrome also.
Yes.
We have some pathological things that go on in our families and inside our communities, especially when it comes to raising boys and girls. Other people smarter than me have pointed this out, that, you know, a lot of our families, we raise the girls different than we raise the boys. You know, the girls are raised to be independent, go to college, be strong, be forward, you know, and
strong, independent Black women.
Yeah. And the boys are overly protected, overly sheltered. And, you know, and some psychologists who deal in African studies say that this goes back to the times of slavery where, you know, mama would, you know, she wanted to protect her son because she didn't want them to get whipped or killed or sold off or, you know, things like that. So this form of raising children kind of slowly developed as a way of protecting the male children and putting the female children, because the slave master and the family, they didn't feel threatened by the females. So it was okay for the female to be a little strong, maybe even have a little sassy mouth with her, that was okay. That was cute. But, the same thing from a male, you get lynched, you get killed, you get sold, and it's coming on in our history.
CL, right? It's actually proven in the period of Jim Crow, where there was 5,000 or so lynchings during this period. 100% of them were black men. 100% of them. And we're talking about public lynchings, where it was a family event by the enemy. They would bring their children, their wives, their women and whatnot. They would castrate these men and shove their genitals down their throats while they were alive, skin them alive, burn them alive as a public entertainment. You understand? Anyways, continue.
No, and that then you take that aspect, this matriarchal kind of side to Black African American families. Then you bring in outside forces, bringing in welfare, food stamps, the friend of the court system, causing breakups in the family, putting the children 80% of the time into the woman's care, extracting payments from the male to the female, off balancing the balances of power inside the family, inside the community. That's how you end up with, Chief Keef. That's how you end up with King Von. That's how you end up with all these trap rappers and all these young boys that are out here imitating that drill rap mentality. Just lost young men that are completely lost. So on one side you hate being Black, but you can't be white, and you can't fit in, and you have all this peer pressure, and you have the females in your family that they won't allow, you feel like they don't want to allow you to be the man you're supposed to be, and the society doesn't want you to be a man either. So it's like you become this perpetual, almost childlike being,
exactly,
who doesn't contribute, who's always messing things up, who's always getting in trouble, who doesn't control and doesn't produce the way a man is supposed to be, at least in the eyes of most people. And we have to slowly reverse these things. We have to draw, just like when you get like a virus in your computer, you got to, run a virus scan and get rid of that stuff, or you got to uninstall some of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff in our minds. I was talking to a brother earlier, my brother Terrence, Assalamu Alaikum, one of the only, I don't know of any other, only Black male Muslim licensed therapist that I know. I've never heard of one before. He's the only one I've ever met before in my life.
And just to quickly cut in here, you mentioned Black Muslim therapists. This is the first thing that these massages should be investing in. Real therapists. Stop passing up the buck of therapy to imams of the masjid. You want the imam to be the imam, the Quran teacher, the Islamic teacher, the therapist, the family therapist, the this, the that, the marriage counselor, and then on top of that, you're paying them like minimum wage salary. You feel me? Like, come on, man. This is very backwards. It's incredibly backwards. But anyways, yeah, a black therapist.
Yep, Black male Muslim therapist.
Not only is it important, but it's absolutely necessary for Black people. We need to take these people very seriously and pay them what they're worth. And every Black person, man, woman, and child should be seeing Black Muslim therapists, in my humble opinion. Go ahead.
But the thing is, if you can find one.
Exactly, because you can't. You know what I mean?
That's like almost impossible thing to find. But like me and the brother were talking about, self-limiting beliefs are like programs. That you like the hardware of your mind and your nervous system. You download certain programs into yourself, and one of those programs are self-limiting beliefs. I talked about how, because I'm in IT, and when I first got into IT, it was through a free program set up by the governor at that time of Michigan, happened to be Republican, but he set up this free program and this was in the middle of the ghetto, teaching, and they were teaching a whole bunch. They were field botany and nurses aid and all this other stuff. But there was one person there who was a former GM, IT technician who worked for GM, and he had retired, and he was teaching these information technology to Black people. And I said he had so many enemies from other Black people because other Black people were saying, "How dare you tell these ghetto people?" Well, they didn't say ghetto people. How you tell these people you're selling them a dream? You have your
the hate is real, bro. Yeah, ironically, the brother Yassine, he does the same thing. He does something very similar, right?
Yeah, I heard him.
Yeah, continue, CL, continue.
So, but this is like in 99, 2000. So nobody, I hadn't heard of anybody else doing anything like this. And like I said, the other teachers, he was a Black man. All the other teachers in the school were Black women, and they gave him the hardest time. They gave him the hardest time and accused him of lying about working at GM, accused him of lying about being a computer technician, accused him of lying to people, telling them they could get jobs making $50, $70, $80, $100,000 a year. Like nobody can make that much. Nobody with no high school diploma or college can make that much money. This is some of the stuff they were saying. So we become our own worst enemies in so many classes. And then the gender war mentality comes in, where if a Black man says something, it should automatically be dismissed. It should automatically be challenged. It should automatically be shot down because it's not possible that a Black man could know what he's talking about.
Exactly.
I just gotta cut in quickly and say I gotta go. This has been a beautiful conversation, mashallah. May Allah bless all of you. Salaam Alaikum.
Thanks for participating.
Salaam Alaikum.
And Brother C, are you staying or are you going as well?
I have to go as well.
Okay. All right. Jazakallah. Thanks for participating as well. Thanks to you. It's been a pleasure. Hayakallah.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Brother Yassine, you were mentioning about the programs you're doing. Actually, my family and we actually started something. We actually started a nonprofit. Not a nonprofit. We're trying to bring it into charitable status. Right? I haven't actually mentioned this on my channel before, but because this is kind of like in line of what we're talking about, I'm mentioning it right now. So the point of this nonprofit is to produce food, organic food, right, within an urban setting.
Yes.
We have the plan and everything.
Right.
Like, it's all professional laid out. We've already done the number of the government number, nonprofit status. Everything is done.
Okay.
We haven't brought it forward to the public yet because of COVID. Right, because of COVID, right? That's the reason why we haven't actually, but inshallah, if you're looking for a plan and if you're looking for, and this is for the brothers and sisters as well, if you look for something important to support, I believe this is one of the most important things to support. Brother brought to my attention from the States that there's a coming crisis with logistics.
Yes.
Of shipping.
It's already here. Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that goes to show how important this thing is. We need our own farms and food. When the poop hits the fan, at least we have somewhere to go to
Brother
feed
Bilal, you're talking about urban. I was thinking more rural, but now that you're talking about urban, there's the indoor or the vertical farming, which creates the ability to grow massive amounts of produce in small spaces.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. I know these systems very well. I've built them before, right? I built them actually in Saudi Arabia, right? So I know them in and out.
Well, I'm down. I'm down. So you guys just check that box next to my name and say Yassine is in. I'm in on it because
anybody else wants to help with this, I want to do this for the community, for the people, and I want to teach Black people how to do this.
Yes,
this is from me, from my heart, for the sake of Allah, to the community. Right. So anybody wants to go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. One of the first things that the colonizers or imperialists will do to overthrow any place or any establishment is take control of the food.
Yes.
It's out of war. It's there, control of food.
Right.
Like if you look at what's happening now in Ghana, there's Monsanto's trying to creep into them and take over their seed. Like it's happened in Ethiopia already, and there's some of the most fertile land on earth is in Somalia and in Ethiopia.
Yep, that's a fact.
Their crops are now controlled by Monsanto, whereby they have seed that doesn't reproduce. So they have to keep going to them to buy more seed to plant this, and they're being told that their land is infertile. It's subhanallah, it's wicked games that they're playing, man. But yeah, no, that's going to be fantastic to be able to have that, because you have food deserts, you have actual food deserts.
That's
in
right.
the UK.
Exactly.
In the UK now,
particularly in urban communities and Black communities, if any government decided today that no shipping is coming in and out to any urban area, those people would starve overnight. Even if you look at Black communities, there are things that are actually cheaper than water in the Black community, like soda, like Tang, like you know what I mean? Like
things that will kill you, basically.
Yeah, things that will kill you is cheaper than water. You feel me? And then we wonder why we have an obesity epidemic in the Black community. It's because we don't actually eat real food. Everything that we purchase for consumption is processed.
And if you want to go through conventional methods to get real food, it's ridiculously expensive. It's so expensive. It's ridiculous. Like in the UK now, there are a lot more people that rely on food banks. So food banks are basically where you go somewhere and they have like deposits of food, like tin food, and just I walked into one the other day before yesterday, and have all sorts of people just relying on this as it's not even like welfare and stamps. It's like you just go in and there's food there, you take what you can and you get out, sort of thing. And it's ridiculous. People can't even grocery shop anymore. And then on top of that, because the UK is like on an island, our logistics used to be done by basically immigrants, and with Brexit happening, like a lot of them no longer have stable like jobs here and anything, so they've probably gone back. And now it's very easy to destabilize anything because of the transportation logistics in terms of like truck drivers and everything. People who are born here don't want to do that work, so they export that work elsewhere. You know what I mean? Yes, thank you, Tika. Canned food which diminished. It's the lining inside the cans. I remember you were saying, subhanallah.
Yes.
But yeah, so like
they're called BPAs,
right.
And not just in the canned foods, but also the Tupperware, right?
Okay.
That's why you're not supposed to put plastics in the microwave, because the BPA aromatizes estrogen, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So continue, brother Bilal.
No, I was saying like a few weeks ago, like the country was in a massive hysteria about getting gasoline, right? We call it petrol here, so there's petrol and diesel, unleaded or whatever. And there was no shortage. Like one company, there are like maybe 6 major companies. One of them had a shortage because they couldn't get the fuel from the tankers to the places. The media reported and told everyone, "Don't panic." What happens? Everyone panics. Everybody panics. You can't get the price of the petrol goes sky high. You can't get anything. You can't get gasoline anywhere, and people are queuing for weeks. And then after 2 weeks,
we had the same thing happen here. What was it? But maybe a month and a half ago, and people were running to the gas stations, putting gas in anything they could find. Plastic bags from the supermarket. One guy put a tarp in the back of his pickup, and he was filling the tarp with gas, and it spilled everywhere as he was driving out. One guy had one of those big water, the big, what are they, 250 gallon, 300 gallon, and he was at the gas tank just pumping it full. Why? Because see, they were not only greedy, and they were trying to say, well, gas is going to go up to $10 a gallon. I'm going to get it at $3.50, and I'm going to sell it for $10 and $20 a gallon. And the thing was over, and it happened because of a hack what was it? What do they call it? The where they had hacked the gas suppliers. They had to shut down all of their pipelines, which were computer controlled, and I think they had like 5 pipelines they supplied to a lot of states, and so and it was over in about 3 days. Because they got their computers back online, and now people have wasted a lot of money. Lady was filling up gas, the plastic bags you get when you go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
She was filling them up and tying
That's
that and putting,
that's crazy.
and you
That's
couldn't
that's not
find
dangerous
gas
at
tank.
all.
You couldn't find the gas tanks
That's
when the
not
gas,
dangerous at all.
right? You couldn't find gas cans when you went to the local auto zone or auto supply spot. They were all gone. People came in and bought even the little 1 liter ones. It's
No.
ridiculous.
So anybody else who wants to join us, just hit the link there. Listen,
I wanted to mention about. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, brother.
I wanted to mention about permanent adolescence sort of thing, and one of the factors to that, alhamdulillah, most of us on here are like professionals. Like the brother Yassine, you work in telecommunications and you got a massive business and stuff going on. Alhamdulillah. The brother CLL works in IT. I myself work in finance systems sort of thing. But growing up, right? Even with shows like I grew up watching the shows like, and we're going to take this back to media because this is what we see. If most of us get our tarbiyah from TV, we grew up watching like the Cosby Show. There was another show called like Desmond's and stuff, which is like a British one, Black Barber Shop, whatever. But then you get to shows that were like more contemporary, like Family Matters with Steve Urkel, or Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Right, where you have black intelligence being seen as something to be laughed at. So even my wife and kids, when you have the little kid who was like Katie's friend or whatever, and he was a genius, like a boy genius, and he was just like the butt of jokes, or like Carlton being the butt of jokes, or like Urkel being the butt of a joke just because he's intelligent. Like black intelligence is seen as something to be laughed at, and then growing up, you don't really have someone you can look at or model yourself after to be like, okay, no, I am on the right path. You want to follow like your basketball player, your musician, or whatever, and then when you get to teenage years, no girls are checking for you. Like
exactly. This point what you brought up is so important. Because in the black community, and I mentioned this to you actually privately, where they look at the black bourgeoisie as kind of sellouts and, people who are not concerned with black issues and whatnot. And, I mean, they kind of ostracize black intelligence, you know what I mean? They see them as nerdy and corny. And in my humble opinion, you need to teach your boys to be corny and nerdy. That if you want to help the community, help them to be nerdy. You feel me? Get on them on their schoolwork. Get on them, like you know what I'm saying? And it's just not just because in any black community, what is the trend is that black communities are taxed by the government. That tax money is taken out of black communities, put into white communities so that they can improve the schooling in white communities and completely neglect the schooling in black communities. And it's so important for particularly boys to educate themselves because already they're starting at a disadvantage if they're in these communities. You understand? Their schools are underfunded. The teachers are overworked. They go into these schools, these public schools, and they are basically surrounded by an environment full of children of single mothers. You understand? All these children don't have any man in the house. You know what I mean? They don't have no man, no guidance, nothing like that. It is imperative that you show black boys the importance of making long-term goals and not just having short-term gratification, you know, and a part of that is showing them the importance of being corny and nerdy. I'm sorry to say it like that, but that's how black men, they look at this stuff. You know what I mean?
The immigrants, like say West Africans, when they emigrate to England, to the UK, that's what they do. Like they value their education. They like the fathers will say, don't follow so and so, and like you get this sort of like culturally outside of Islam, you get this cultural denigration of the Westerners. So my father, alhamdulillah, he was Ghanaian, so he emigrated from Ghana after studying in University of Nigeria to Trinidad and Tobago, right, which is basically where I was born and raised myself. And so I don't get into the whole Caribbean Africa beef. I don't get into the whole Nigeria Ghana beef either. But when you hear Africans say, "Oh, you're hanging out with him, are you Jamaican?" Like they think that all Jamaicans do is sit around and smoke weed and do nothing all day. The Caribbeans have a lot of value to add, and they're hardworking as well, right? But it's just the image that's portrayed of the Caribbean to the rest of the world, and which is controlled basically by the Western media.
The enemy. Let's call them what they are. They're the enemy. Yeah.
So you have the enemy telling the West that Africans are living in huts with bones in their nose, and you have the same enemy telling Africans that Jamaicans just smoke weed all day and do nothing. So we don't bridge that gap. Yeah, and we can help each other in a great way.
MK Ultra, what you got for us, bro?
Hey, Assalamu alaikum
warahmatullah.
How you brothers doing?
Alhamdulillah.
You know, you guys were touching on the point about educating the youth, especially the males. My education is in teaching, and that's where a lot of my experience is. And I also have skills in trade. I have taught my son how to read by the time he was 3 years old. Now he's 4, and he's reading bigger books at a decent pace. I think a lot of the problem comes in with the absentee of father in these homes.
Thank you.
It's important for us as men to bite the bullet, even if we don't get sleep, and be present fathers. The way the women think is a little bit different than us. And there's a reason for that, and it has benefit too. You know, they also have to have that emotional side. They need to have that compassionate side. But there's a side of hikmah or wisdom that needs to come from the father, and you need to study how your child works, how they think, how they learn. Know how to advance that to the next level and to increase and intensify and speed it up so that they're at a higher level than you would have been at school at their ages or anybody else at their ages. We need to give them a very good head start. When you have these broken homes and broken families, these kids are not given that fatherhood role. Like, for example, even when we grew up, it was most of the time it was a single mother home. And then when my mother got remarried, we had tension between us and our stepfather. So there was problems there. Still, our mother tried to be in control. She's like old school Kingston Jamaican mentality. And that roughness, it only lasted for a certain period of time. Once we hit 14, we were gone. The males in the home, we were gone on our own, doing our own thing. As long as we knew we could make money for ourselves. For me, I grew up mostly around like the Asian community, like Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, because they were about making money. The black guys at my school were about smoking cess and sleeping with a bunch of women at the same time in the same room. That wasn't for me. My brother, he grew up mostly with those misguided black guys in that school. And for me, I was always like about making money. Because I was with those Asian guys, it forced me to mature quickly, but it was in a godless way because, you know, Asians, they're very godless people. My brother, he maintained a childish mentality to the point where he was in his 40s and still bragging about stealing bikes like he was 16 years old or 14 years old. Like that childish mentality has never left. And it was like there was no fatherhood there. And once I changed my life and I started to study more and I became Muslim, I had a better connection with my stepfather. I had a relationship with my real father. They were guiding me through it, went back to school, and now I've become a responsible father myself. Alhamdulillah. But if we, as young men, don't get our act together, especially young black men, if we don't get our act together and at least teach ourselves or find the right guidance, rather than seeing somebody on the corner and seeing he has something we don't have, so we look to him as an example of success. If we don't look to the right examples of success and we don't try to aspire to be that, we are either going to end up dead, in jail, or lost under a bottle or drug abuse. Because this is what the system has designed for us, and this is where they want to see us. But we have to grow out of that and do better for our children.
You raised some really good points there. Like, we need to fix ourselves before we can fix the others.
100%.
So, alhamdulillah, like, I've got small kids myself, and I'm trying to be as present as I can for them. I've got, alhamdulillah, 2.5-year-old twins. That's why I had to jump off, because I was putting them to bed and play with them for a little bit before they went. I raised up on Islam. Like, I want to hit you up for tips on how to get my kids reading, because they enjoy books. Alhamdulillah.
Not only will you get tips, I'm designing a curricular that I have made myself and tested it on my own children, and I'm going to have it available. Most of it will be for free, and then there will be other parts that will be paid aspects. I'm going to be putting this online because I can't find content that is good and suitable for Black Muslim children to be learning and reading and growing up on. So I'm creating it myself.
Very good.
Well, we can assist.
Allah make you successful.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
To Tiffany Watson's comment, you don't have to be a father to make a difference. There was a Big Brother, system in America, wasn't there? Where it's like a mentorship program. But what we don't have, what we don't see is you don't see Black male success outside of, because the machine, our enemies, do not portray that image. It's not as if we don't exist. We exist. We're here. It's just we're not shown. And like, I want to help. I would love to mentor someone. Like, but then I'm fighting white supremacy at the same time. You know?
Yeah. And this is what we gotta understand, is that if you're not building no community without no family. There is no Black community with no Black family. You understand? And this thing is of utmost importance. And now that we have Islam, we have to kind of take the bull by the horns and control ourselves, control our women, control our children, because nobody's going to help us. As a matter of fact, every other community is banking and investing in our destruction. That's the reality. It's not just white people. Okay, let's be clear about that. If you go to Libya today, right? What do you think is going to happen to your Black self if you go to Libya today, right? What do you think?
Enslavement, forced enslavement.
Thank you. That's the Muslim country. Okay, what do you think is going to happen to your Black self if you're working as a Black teacher in Saudi Arabia and a white South African just kind of walks through the door? You know what I mean? What do you think? This is the reality of the world that we live in. You understand? So we have to look at the things as they are. We can't just pretend that these things are not happening, and nobody's going to come and save us.
No,
we have to.
They don't care about us.
Of course, they don't care. Of course, they care about our money, right? They care about how much we can spend for them and how much time we can spend making them rich and working for them, because we're not educated enough to work for ourselves. They care about that.
And you know what? That's the point of economic empowerment for the community, as on a community level, right? Is that when you have that, and we were talking earlier about building that foundation and that infrastructure that for our education, for our businesses, for our message, all of that, that then you control your economy and then they'll start listening. They'll do as you know. But of course,
because power respects power.
Exactly, and
power doesn't respect the one with the placard or the picket sign and exactly what Bilal just did like this. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
Who respects that? You begging your enemy for your rights and your civil rights and justice, and we demand justice and whatnot.
Exactly.
Like what is you talking about?
Right.
You demanding justice? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You have everything ass backwards. Sorry to say like that. You get the power first, then you take the justice.
That's it.
You understand?
That's it.
You know what I mean? And we are in such a terrible shape and terrible situation that the only way out of this situation is with Allah's help, and all glory is going to go to Allah. But at the same time, those brothers who are talking about, because we talked about this before, right? And this is of utmost importance, these people who speak in these arbitrary, capricious, like vague, ambiguous terms, talking about, all you need is Tawheed, and all you need is correct Aqidah, and just follow the Quran and Sunnah, the understanding of Salaf, and everything will be okay. Like it's essentially Christianity. It's Islamicized Christianity. That's what it is. Let's call it what it is. You know what I mean? It is the epitome of irja. You guys know irja, like the murjia, where they say all you have to do is believe and everything will be fine. Just on faith only. Allah doesn't tell you that in the Quran. He says, Amanu wa amilu salihah. You have to believe and do the righteous actions.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Exactly.
These guys just want to just believe, and don't be black and blah, blah, blah. And, and they've been doing this for the better part of 30 years now, and the results are showing, and they're still singing the same crappy song. You know what I mean? And we ain't trying to hear that no more. Like, we have work to do. If that's what you want to do, then you stay over there in your little corner, talk about that. And us over here, we're going to be working. That is as simple as that. You know what I mean? These brothers who talk about that, when you want to build a bridge, do you build a bridge with materials? Let's say there's two teams, okay? There are two teams, okay? One team has materials, construction equipment, planning, and the other team has Tawheed, Quran and Sunnah, understanding of Salaf. Who's going to build a bridge first?
Materials.
Exactly, right? These guys are bastardizing the religion and calling it the religion. They're making a mockery, like as Sheikh Yassin said, they make a mockery of the religion and say it is the religion. That's not the religion. When the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to make jihad, did he make the jihad with a sword? Or did he make jihad, everybody, Aqidah, Aqidah, Quran and Sunnah. What are you talking about? You use the proper tools for the occasion. You know what I mean? You use the tools that are appropriate for the occasion. These guys are using this overly dogmatic rhetoric in order to keep us not doing anything. That's the whole point of that. Don't fix your situation. Don't fix your community. Just wait for Allah to come from the sky and fix it, and everything will be a-okay.
Yeah, and that's why pardon?
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's not to say to everyone that's listening that we do away with Aqidah and Quran.
We understand that. We know that Aqidah is important. We know nobody's saying it's not important.
It's the driving factor of what we do. It just doesn't. So it's like if you have a progression, you have your Aqidah and understanding, then you have your Aminu. Belief, then righteous action. So belief and then righteous action. Most people are just stopping at the belief part.
Exactly.
They're not going forward to the righteous action.
Yeah, that's irja. That's being munaji. Right. You know what I mean? You wait for Allah to build your community for you. You don't put in the work. Did the Prophet? Is that what the Prophet did? He waited and then the community was built. Like, what is you talking about? Go ahead, Bilal. Sorry to cut you off.
No. What gives me, like, because sometimes you need to conceptualize things and give yourself purpose and focus, because when you're fighting such a ravenous enemy and it feels like such a monumental task, Allah's the one that gets you out of it. But we may die before we realize our goals in this life. And so what sometimes gives me hope and purpose is the hadith, which talks about how just before we even cross the Sirat in Yom Al-Qiyamah, how justice will be meted out to the point where a ram that kills another ram, one that has horns and the other one doesn't, justice will be met between those two. So our situation, subhanAllah, there's a lot of injustice. That's what I meant by my status. I put a status up on my WhatsApp the other day. Justice in this life or the next, like we gotta get it. We gotta get it. And yeah, so alhamdulillah, like I have no problem, I have no qualms. My belief in Allah is there, and then I have to put the action in with the belief.
Thank you. Go ahead, MK Ultra.
For sure, like that's a given. 100% the belief is number one. That's our foundation. We have no structure to stand on if we don't have that belief in Allah. And actually, that is what makes us stronger than every other community. We just haven't realized it yet, and we haven't taken it practically yet. The point that I wanted to make is that this is why we can't rely on anybody else. We can't depend on anybody else, and we can't trust anybody else, whether they're the Muslim community around us or not. They might be our brothers in Islam, they ain't our Muslim brothers. And most of them probably ain't even our brothers in Islam because they've sold out. Islam for them is like what our skin color or our names are to us.
Yes, it's a cultural.
It is just a cultural thing that they took with them from whatever country they came from to participate in Western white supremacy. It doesn't mean to them what it means to us. But the reality of them is kind of like if the Prophet ﷺ was to side with the Quraysh and the rich from the Quraysh rather than the oppressed who were suffering in Mecca at that time. Or if Musa alayhi salam, if he came back and he started working against the Bani Israel and talking against them and joining Pharaoh because of the situation of the Bani Israel, they have abandoned the ones who are being oppressed to join the oppressor so that they can live comfortable lives. But they do not realize that the oppressor is their biggest enemy. They don't get that part. We do because we have history with these people. We need to take care of us. We need to work together. We need to do therapy and counseling between each other. We need to coach each other and help each other. Just like these guys have all helped each other in their communities, we need to help ourselves without them.
MK Ultra, I have to take a contention with that. I don't fully agree with that.
You don't agree?
I don't fully agree with it. I can understand where you're coming from. There are people who come over here to get the bag, as Brother Bilal constantly says, and that's the truth. But I think that's not necessarily and always due to a willful thing. That might be due to just ignorance, because in their countries. So, for instance, I grew up in Trinidad, where like it was 50%, like almost 50% black, 50% Indian, and then everyone else, right? So I never really understood or experienced real racism or anything until I moved to the UK at age 15. Right. So what I'm trying to say is like they probably don't understand the gift of Islam that they have, which is why when they meet a revert like us, they're like, "MashaAllah, brother! Oh, I wish I was like you. I wish you had Islam all your life." I ask the same questions you should have asked yourself. Like when you find that truth as a cultural Muslim and practice properly, I see them as my brothers. When they start practicing properly, it doesn't matter where your background's from. And yes, there are people who come culturally and want to grab the bag. And yes, we need to trust on ourselves and rely on ourselves to get ourselves out of the hole we're in. But we can't discard our brothers and sisters from other backgrounds, because there are people from other backgrounds and other ethnicities and everything that are upon the correct understanding of Islam and will want to help us.
No doubt. If they are practicing real Islam and they have taken Shahada, they've accepted Islam into their heart 100%, we don't have any problem working with them. I'm not saying that we disregard them. I'm saying most of them have sold out in order to be in the certain places that they're in. And we need to understand the importance of doing things for us before we can help everybody else. I'm not saying we shouldn't help other people at all. I'm saying we have a big, major problem and sickness in our community that needs our attention.
Oh yeah, big facts.
There's gonna be time for helping them, and sure, if they've become real Muslims and they come into Islam 100% properly, there's no problem with them doing certain things to help us, but we're not relying on that. Our reliance is on Allah and working with each other.
Alhamdulillah.
Sheikh Yassin?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with the point that I think the reconciling what both of our brothers were saying, they certainly are, on point. I think there, as the brother said, he disagreed with one aspect of it, but I think our brother MK Ultra sort of clarified his position, and I think they're both in agreement. Am I right?
Yeah, I agree with what he
Yeah, for sure.
It was
brother
just
Naeem?
We could never disregard a real Muslim.
No disagreement here.
Beautiful.
Go ahead, Sheikh Yassin.
No, it's just simply, don't have anything really to add to what the brother said, except to say that certainly, working together with sincerity, sincerity, one of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is found in 40 hadith, says that ad-din an-nasiha, right? And many of us, we take and say, well, nasiha means sincerity or to sincerely give advice, but it's greater than that when you studied it. In fact, just was listening yesterday to our brother live, Abu Muhammad, do a Abdul Rauf Shaker do a he's going through 40 hadith, and he was on that particular hadith. And one of the things he pointed out, which I did not know, right? Yeah, that's why we study. We're always studying. Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said on his deathbed, he said, "Ana talib, I'm a student," right? One of the greatest scholars of our time, his position was that he was still a student, right? And so I'm definitely still a student. I'm trying to be a student of knowledge. But the point I wanted to say is that it means not just sincerity, but it means completeness. The deen is accepting all of it together. Part of that meaning is to accept all of it, not taking part in leaving some, but accepting all of the deen and implementing it all in order to be complete. In order to complete the process, as Allah says in the Quran. I think there's a verse where Allah Ta'ala, pardon me if it says, idkhul fi din khafan, to enter into the religion completely, right? Right, and not partially, and we know that when the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and I said I'm not a student of knowledge, but I'm going to refer to a hadith that I'm sure we've all heard, when the Bilal ibn Rabah was called by a name that was it was bad, right? It was derogatory, right? By one of the companions, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, he said, that you still have jahiliyyah in you, it talked to the person who called him that, fika jahiliyyah, you still have ignorance in you, meaning that this companion had not completely entered and understood the relationship that Bilal ibn Rabah was his brother, right? And what did he do? He went to Bilal to apologize, and he put his head on the ground and told Bilal to put his foot on it, right? Which was for the Arabs going back many thousands, hundreds of years at least, many beyond the time of the Prophet ﷺ, to put your foot on a person's head was the epitome. It was the height of disrespect, right? And he, in order to sort of make a means for his statement, and he, that shows it's out of that. He put himself in that position, right? And told, which Bilal ibn Rabah, he radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he refused to do it, but this person was willing to in order to show his humble himself, right? And so sometimes we have to humble ourselves and also while at the same time commit ourselves to a cause that we all love and we all agree, just as I think we all here are willing to do. We're ready to move forward just by our presence here and by our sharing honestly and interacting the way we are respectfully. Even if we disagree, like our brother he said, I disagree. We don't have a problem. Disagree don't mean we got to throw the hands, right? It just means that we have to discuss it. And then our brother MK Ultra brought clarity. Say again.
We need more of this.
This is exactly what we need.
Exactly.
But this is us by nature.
Yes, it is. It is. Isn't that something? It is. It is.
What's the problem is if we disagree and then we say and then we hate each other because we disagree with each other.
Right.
That's
the
problem.
That's a problem. That's right.
Yeah. But
no.
even
I don't
back
even think that's us.
Not us, but I
don't think that is us. I think this has been trained into us from the media, what we grew up on, the societies we grew up in, the situations we were put in from young ages. I think us essentially, we're compassionate, we're kind, we're understanding, we're loving, we're real. And I think that realness between us is natural.
Oh yeah.
Any kind of animosity has been trained into us.
You know, Muhammad, I was about to, because I'm glad you said that before I said what I wanted to say, right? Because I was about to say, because back a days, brothers would, not only would they disagree, they would have like a hardcore arguments, like big arguments, yelling and screaming at each other. But the next day they were brothers. There's no problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think what's happening in our time is because of social media, it's very easy to block somebody. You know what I mean? You can cut them off totally. That's what's happening. That's caught now when you disagree in our time. If you disagree, especially publicly, right? You can't be brothers. You know what I mean? You have to hate each other. You have to hate
cancel culture.
That's right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we ain't about that. Like I disagree with many people, and you see me disagreeing with a whole bunch of people on this channel. But I never say that they're not my brother. You know what I'm saying? They're my brothers when we're having a disagreement. I don't hate them. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I wouldn't say, don't listen to this guy. He's like, no, I've never said, even in my personal practice, I've never disliked another Muslim's video or content ever in my life. Even though Muslims have come and tried to shut down my entire channel. Right, but those same people I'm criticizing that came and shut down my channel, you know, I never disliked any of their videos. Those same people, not even dislike. You know what I mean?
SubhanAllah.
You know,
but this is real Islam. This is real Islam. Even when the right-hand Khalifas, one thing they had about them was shura. They would call and gather other Sahabas to the place where the Amir was, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they could agree to disagree. They could all have different opinions. You knew at the end of the day, the Khalifa's decision was final. But nobody hated each other for having different opinions.
Different opinions. You know what I mean? Look at China and the States right now. They are like a hair's width away from war, and they made an agreement with each other recently. You know what I mean? And we as Black Muslims who are going through the same experience in the diaspora can't agree on like small things. You know, that's why we can't get anything done, because all this ridiculous, you know, argumentation that causes splitting. Oh, don't go with that, brother. You know, he said this and that about Sheikh Rabi or something like that. You know what I mean? But what did this shit you have to do with our lives, bro? Like, we out here. You know what I'm saying? We in it over here, man. You know, can we please solve these problems? If the States and Chinese can solve our problem, their own problems, and they're kuffar, we can't solve it as Muslims. You know what I mean? It's crazy, man. But yeah, that was my little rant. I just wanted to say that just because you disagree, it doesn't mean that you hate your brother or you know what I mean? You can't be brothers. Like, we have to go back to back a days where you could just argue like big arguments and then go to dinner that same night. We have to go back like that, man.
And the only way to train that out of us is to have these discussions where we do have disagreements, see other people's point of views, and accept that there might be a different way to look at something without hating the other person.
Yeah, that's why I'm happy you brought that up. I'm happy you brought that up.
A disagreement is not a dismissal of the other person's intelligence, because that's what it's equated to today. It's like you have so much stake in your opinion because you believe that everything you've researched is everything that's right. And so when someone disagrees with that, you're like, but everything I thought about, my whole philosophy it's in this opinion, it's in this. So I disagree with that. I disagree with you, and you're dismissed entirely. And that's the sort of disconnect. That's the sort of disconnect that needs to be made. Is that your opinion, like you come in with a full cup, basically. You think that you can't learn anymore. You think you are the alim sort of thing. Like, no, you can learn.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You need
you can't be wrong. Your opinion can't be wrong. You can never be mistaken, whatever. You know what I mean?
I love these are feminine traits.
Yeah, they are feminine traits. Actually, I mentioned that last week in the I believe in the women's meeting, where that's this trait, and you can see what Sister Tika said there. Men hold grudges like women nowadays, and that's a 100% fact. You know,
that's why I keep less friends these days.
You know what I mean? And I was mentioning that Brother Shadid Muhammad, he mentioned a very pertinent point that basically the gist of it was that men now, they will get into arguments in order to prevent from being disrespected, and they have to prove their point, and they have to yell and scream and carry on. And he said that's a feminine trait, and you get it because of your single mother. You understand? You know, and I was like, and when he said that, I was like, damn. You know,
social emasculation as well.
What's your response to that? You know what I mean? Because it's true, and we see it in the Black community, right? And what's exasperating this problem is social media.
Yes.
You know? Because with social media, because of this ability to any person can, you know, just say anything and then block this one, and it basically exasperates these effeminate traits in men. You know what I mean? And on top of that, this type of blocking and cutting off Muslims is haram anyways. Because the Prophet said you can't cut off your brother for more than 3 days. Muslims are legit blocking Muslims, blocking them. You know what I mean? Like how? Like even me, I can't even. Because you know I'm old school. It doesn't process in my head. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, block a Muslim. What?
I can't remember the last time I hit the block button in my life.
You know, this reminds of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he asked the companions, they were in the masjid, and he said, do you all want to see a person of Jannah? And of course, everybody wants to see a person of Jannah. And he said, the person who walks through that door next is a person of Jannah. You know this hadith. Please help me out here, Bilal. But when the brother walked through, people looked, and they were like, so... Like
regular guy.
What are you doing?
Regular guy comes to the door. What's up with him, right? And so who was it that went to him and made the excuse to kind of spend some time with him?
I forget which one, subhanAllah. But one of the Arabs goes over to his house. It's like, oh, can you like just let me stay for a couple of days? He stays for like 3 days.
Right, yep, exactly.
He doesn't say anything special. He's just like, he prays the 5-time day prayers. He goes out, he works, he comes back, whatever. Okay.
I don't see him standing for tahajjud. I don't see him fasting any extra fast. So what? He finally asked him, what? You know, the Prophet. He explained himself and shared with him. You know, he kind of came straight with them. Look, the reason why I'm here because I wanted to check you out, right? And the companion said, well, I can't think of anything that's special except that every night before I lay down, before I go to sleep, he says he cleanses his heart. Anyone who wronged him, anything that something was done against him, he forgives it. And when I first heard that hadith, I had to stop and think. And I was like, Wow. Because I know brothers, as the sister pointed out earlier, who carry grudges for years.
Yeah.
They
He
see
stepped
a
on my
brother, they
shoes
haven't
last week.
seen them, huh? Yeah,
He
they
stepped on
haven't
my
seen the
shoes last
brother
week.
in 7, 8 years.
Mm.
And they see him. In one case in Mecca, saw the brother in Mecca and had bad words to say about the brother. And I said, when is the last time you seen him? 7 years ago. The
Wow.
brother been living in Mecca for 7 years. He hadn't seen him for like 8 years. He'd been living and working in Mecca.
Mm.
And he came up. He was a wonderful brother. Abdul Latif, man, he loved to talk. I used to say in the old days, he need a talk show because he always had something to say. He always had, and he came up to us. He had some books in his hand, and he was raving about these books that he had.
Mm.
And I say, nothing's changed about this brother. He's something else. And this brother had something bad standing in the haram.
Mm.
And I told him, I said, people change. People, I don't know what his problem was, but I'm saying, hey, how wipe that out.
Yeah.
This brother. But like the sister said, yeah, a lot of brothers, unfortunately, have taken on that feministic characteristic.
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact. It is an effeminate trait, and it's haram. And people put when it comes to religion, they talk this good game about religion, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, for the most minor of things, they're ready to throw the entire deen out the window just to protect the honor. And again, that it gets exacerbated by social media and whatnot, because it kind of messes with your psychology. You have to be right. You can be anybody behind the screen, and one of the main things we can do to help Black men is just say, please just stay off of social media, particularly Facebook, Instagram. Just don't. Just please don't. You know what I mean?
No, you're right.
Anyways, I'll let you guys get your last comments in, inshallah, and then we'll close it out, inshallah.
I'm going to have to leave, actually.
Okay.
So I'm giving my salam now.
Yep, Jazakallah khair. Hayakallah. Thanks so much, Brother Naeem, for participating. Hayakallah. Jazakallah khair. Okay, Brother Bilal?
Naam, there's a beautiful discussion, alhamdulillah. I wish we could do something like this again soon and actually get some action points together. So
hit me up for some pointers on teaching the children.
Inshallah,
yeah. And actually for me, I just want the brothers, if they want to support the food project, brother Muhammad MK Ultra, he knows about it already, right? So, and then again, the only reason why I haven't actually pushed it is because of COVID-19, right? Because it requires move, you need to get a place and all this kind of stuff. But all the paperwork and the organization is already legit. We can take donations and we can actually do the work. You understand? So, and I'm ready, inshallah. So, if you guys want to hit me up behind the scene, maybe we can make a what you call, what's that app called again? Not WhatsApp, the other one.
Telegram.
Yeah, we can make a Telegram group, right? And we can get that going forward, inshallah. Right?
Cool.
Where are you located at?
Ottawa, Ontario.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're up north there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, this project, it can be done anywhere. I'm obviously gonna start where I'm at, but I would actually go anywhere and help anybody set this up, especially in poor areas, because you will get fresh food, and it teaches people how to farm in urban settings.
Yes, very good. I would definitely. Like I said, I'm definitely down, because I'm thinking along those same lines with the land that we're inshallah trying to acquire now.
If you have land, right, then that's even better. Obviously, you can make a much larger scale.
Right. Yeah, larger scale. But I like the urban aspect, because you're right. If we can bring this into the heart of urban environments, then the people can be better exposed to it, as opposed to it being in a rural area on the farm. They can get a taste of it and what have you. But if it's right there, if they can go and take
And
advantage of it.
and you can teach people how to do this
Exactly.
themselves,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that has a much greater impact
Mhm.
in terms of empowering people for
Yeah.
their very important food,
Yeah, exactly. And that's my whole goal anyway. That's the goal behind this
Yeah.
organization and the Islam Prophet, anyways.
Alhamdulillah.
Right. Okay. And any other last words, brothers?
Jazakallah khair, bro. Jazakallah khair for doing this. It's important for our community to have some kind of outlet where we can just talk to each other and counsel each other, do some therapy with each other, and be open and honest with each other. I think it's the beginning of something healing for us.
Mm. Indeed. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I believe so as well. Okay, bros. So
All right,
that's
good to meet you, brothers. And remember, Brother Bilal, Richard, if you hit up Bilal, you'll get my information, and I'll send you some pointers, videos, even some handouts where we can use to help raise our young ones, inshallah.
Barakallahu fik. Alhamdulillah.
I would like to thank all the brothers who participated. Alhamdulillah, we got a lot of brothers participate today, and I'm very happy about that. It's something so important. I would like to thank the sister Tika and the brother Waleed and the brother Yasin for their generosity in donating to the channel. May Allah multiply it for all of you 1,000-fold.
Ameen.
Yeah, I want to thank all our guests who participated in this last stream. Of course, we have to thank Allah Azza wa Jal, who is uniting us, uniting the hearts, putting seriousness in the hearts of the people and making us, like a family. Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Ameen. We say
Ameen. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.